Chapter 654. Busy. The sound electric currents dragged the lost soul that had fallen into the darkness back to reality. Kira, who woke up from the chaos and darkness without knowing the time, was faced with a mess. The cracked screen, broken or disconnected wires were scattered in all directions, making the operating table look particularly broken. There was also the glass mask in front of him that had a crack across it. Amidst the dizziness that had yet to fade, a fragmented memory quietly emerged. The broken but fearless Morbius that was charging toward the holy Accord Gouda, as well as the terrifying impact that was accompanied by a loud and crazy slogan. For the blue and clean world. The moment this slogan appeared in Kira's mind again, all the fragmented memories instantly formed a terrifying picture. It was Morbius. It was those Morbius that were charging toward the Holy Accord Gouda. Even if Kira's piloting skills were good enough, and the performance of the Holy Accord Gundam was excellent enough, in the face of those fearless Morbius, who would decisively self-destruct the moment the Gundam avoided their charge, they were so powerless. Even if nuclear bombs were placed in a vacuum, they would only be oversized bombs. However, the moment the number of self-destructs reached a qualitative change, the Holy Accord Gouda would inevitably be affected, and it might even be difficult for him to escape. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Kira finally erupted. Now that the trajectory of history had changed, Kira finally ushered in the Day of Awakening. However, this Day of Awakening came so late. So late that if there was the slightest mistake, Kira would be dragged into the abyss of eternal damnation by this terrifying tide of self-destruction. Even so, Kira, who gave it his all, could only pilot the Holy Accord Gouda and escape by a fluke. Quantum computer virus distribution system offline. Unable to connect to virus distribution equipment. Low power output of power furnace. Unable to last more than 3 minutes in battle. All weapon systems are offline. Enduring the wave-like headache, Kira quickly checked the Holy Accord Gouda's data and system. The result was not optimistic. Kira and Holy Accord Gouda, who had luckily escaped, could no longer stay on this battlefield. Once those crazy Earthlings discovered that Gouda was still alive, they would probably face an even more terrifying situation than before. However, if he left just like that, the crisis that Plant was facing would not be resolved. However, Kira was powerless to do so now. Lux. Looking at the Morbius charging madly amidst the artillery fire of Zaftames, Kira recalled the sickly face under the gray hair. I want to go back and see her. For some reason, this thought immediately occupied Kira's mind as soon as it appeared, quickly dispelling his worries about Plant being destroyed by nuclear weapons. Driven by this thought, Holy Accord Gouda, who was lucky enough to survive the self-destruction of many Morbius, left the battlefield without anyone noticing and flew toward Yakindue. Holy Accord Gouda's departure did not become an opportunity for change in this battlefield that defended Plant's safety. It also did not make this battlefield worse. From the beginning, the worst situation was caused by the sudden departure of the photographic figurine troops. After a bitter battle and pursuit, the Zaft MS troops, led by Nigger, Isaac, and Diego, finally stabilized the defense line. However, as long as 1 or 2 Peace Pioneers broke through this newly stabilized defense line, it would usher in a terrifying outcome. April City, or other cities in Plant, they would definitely be hit by the nuclear weapons fired by the Peace Pioneers, reproducing the terrible disaster of Bloody Valentine's Day. What a hindrance! Croth, am I right? The 3 cockroaches followed behind the rest of the Peace Pioneers. Their gazes were focused on the pitch-black Gundam, the Dual Gundam, and the Storm Gundam that were blocking their advance. Hearing Xiani's question, Croth only responded to his partner's question with a vague sentence. No, not even a sentence, just a simple syllable. The vague words not only made Xia and I feel uncomfortable, but also made Olga reveal a look of pity. Although the 3 roaches often fought among themselves, they actually care about each other. Among the many orphans collected by the Blue Persian Chrysanthemum, only the 3 of them could become the same batch of MS pilots. The rest were either judged to be defective and dealt with, or could not withstand the test, and died on the spot. Croft, let's go. Olga gritted his teeth. No matter how many words he had in his heart, it only turned into this sentence in the end. In the sudden light of the fire in the propulsion backpack, the three roaches drove their bodies past the Peace Pioneers' troops and attacked the Dark Assault. Isaac, Earth United's new model is here. As soon as the three roaches appeared, Nigger immediately noticed their existence. Good. Coming. Without saying a word, the three of them tacitly launched a 3-on-3 battle. At the same time, on the edge of the battlefield that was getting more and more intense, the 8th Fleet, under the crazy and reckless rush, finally arrived at the edge of the battlefield after paying the price of overloading the power furnace of many battleships and causing them to be paralyzed and even explode on the spot. As soon as they approached the battlefield, the 8th Fleet received the fierce battle situation from the center of the battlefield. This is really a big scene. Sitting in the command seat, Halberton's face was solemn. It was not difficult to see the direction of the battlefield. What was difficult was how to make the right decision. Ms. Jormungand, what's your master's plan? After pondering for a moment, Halberton looked at Jormungand. Of course, it's to destroy Genesis as soon as possible. We don't care about the outcome of the battle between Earth United and Zaft. What we care about is to prevent Earth from being destroyed by Genesis. Jormungand naturally knew about the actions of the three-ship alliance, but it did not mean that she would say it out loud. Genesis? It's really a difficult decision to make. Halberton's goal from the start was to prioritize the Genesis era. However, after arriving at the battlefield, Halberton found that there was only one choice in front of him. No matter which one he chose, Halberton was bound to face another terrible situation. I didn't expect Ms. Jormungand to be someone who likes to come up with puzzles. But this is not a difficult choice. Halberton pondered for a moment and understood Jormungand's intention. From the moment he saw Jormungand, he found that Jormungand seemed to have a strong sense of trust and even a faint sense of worship in some aspects. Therefore, Halberton, who should have remained calm, made the most risky choice in his life. In the midst of Jormungand's smile, Halberton raised his right hand and ordered loudly, "All battleships, prepare for first-level combat. Target, Peace Pioneer Force. Our 8th Fleet will participate in the battle to surround Plant. This does not mean that we have given up our hostile stance against Plant, but to prevent this war from falling into a more terrible abyss, and to prevent our home planet from being destroyed." After a pause, the scene of the last batch of Peace Pioneers launching nuclear weapons appeared in front of Halberton's eyes. "All battleships, fire. Target, nuclear bombs." In an instant, the 8th Fleet burst out with the first roar of joining the war. The salvo of artillery fire instantly interweaved into an airtight interception net in front of Plant, shooting down the nuclear weapons one by one. The scene of Gauda blocking all the nuclear bombs launched by the Peace Pioneer Force with his own power reappeared. But this time it was done by the 8th Fleet. The sudden artillery fire. The sudden arrival of the fleet. The heat of the battlefield suddenly cooled down by 30%. Whether it was the Earth Alliance side or Zaft's side, they were all stunned by the sudden entry of the 8th Fleet into the battle. "I'm Duan Halberton. Now notify the remnants of the Earth Alliance fleet that our enemy is not Plant, but Patrick Serra, who created the Genesis, and destroy the Genesis as quickly as possible. Continuing to attack Plant is just a waste of our precious time, and we don't have much time left." When the broadcast from Halberton resounded throughout the battlefield, the frenzied momentum of the remnants of the Earth Alliance fleet suddenly withered. Duan Halberton. Didn't this guy die together with Ptolemy when he was hit by the Genesis? Lars Muddy, who was clamoring to teach the regulator a lesson, saw Halberton appear on the screen and immediately jumped. The next moment, Lars Muddy seemed to feel something and suddenly turned his head to look at Bucky Lulu, who was sitting in the captain's seat. The female captain, who was pointed at by him just now and had no choice but to submit, was looking at him sharply, her eyes full of mockery. "You, Nader, what are you looking at? Quickly carry out your mission." Lars Muddy, whose face gradually began to distort, reached into his arms and was about to repeat the previous scene of threatening Bucky Lulu with a gun, but he was suddenly pressed against the wall by two quick-witted soldiers. You, rebel! Lars Mutayazi, who still wanted to struggle, was caught by the third soldier. With a forceful pull, the pistol was taken away on the spot. Nader, Hal Barton, you're crazy. You'll be the sinners of humanity. Let me go. Lars Mutayazi, who was frantically struggling, kept shouting, but he did not get a response from Bucky Lulu. Take him down. Watch over him. After giving the order indifferently, Bucky Lulu raised her hand and pressed down on her hat to calm her frantically beating heart. She did not expect that the change she was waiting for would come so quickly. It was so fast that she almost could not react. Contact Admiral Hal Barton. Archangel, request to join the 8th Fleet in the battle against Genesis. In addition, inform the remaining warships of the Moon Fleet whether to follow Admiral Halberton's footsteps or stay here to fend for themselves. Everything is up to them. Yes. In the blink of an eye, Bucky Lulu and Archangel launched an unexpected counterattack with Halberton's astonishing appearance and took back the command from the crazy Lars Mutayazi. On the side of Archangel, Halberton's appearance also surprised everyone on Archangel. Admiral, are you still alive? Margot was stunned. Captain, received a communication request from the 8th Fleet. Mirielia's voice came at the right time. Quick, connect. As soon as Margot's voice fell, Halberton's image appeared on the screen. Long time no see. Lamias, now is not the time to catch up. I have learned about your experience from Ms. Jormungand. So, let's focus all our energy on the mission of destroying Genesis. Looking at the dignified Halbarton, Margot opened her mouth and finally responded with a serious salute. Yes, Admiral. The situation changed. As soon as Halbarton and the 8th Fleet appeared, the pressure on Zaf's side suddenly decreased. The Earth Alliance, which was originally launching a crazy attack without fear of death, split into two waves. One wave fought and retreated, bypassing the battlefield and going straight to the 8th Fleet of Genesis. The other wave maintained their crazy attack, ignoring the existence of the 8th Fleet. What exactly is going on? In the duel that forced Gouda to retreat, Gouda looked at the Earth Alliance that was torn into two pieces from afar. Wyzak was in disbelief. This is an opportunity. Wyzak, as long as we kill the enemy in front of us, this war will be over. Nigger more or less knew about Ray Kai's plan, so when he saw the Earth Alliance's Moon Fleet split due to the appearance of Halbarton, he was relieved. Although the situation was grim, it was not as dangerous as before. The strong intervention of the 8th Fleet triggered a sharp change in the battlefield, which also affected Yakindue's side. Amidst the gunshots, Kreutzer nimbly passed through the aisles and quickly rushed into Neku where his Oracle Gouda was parked. The moment he left the aisle, Kreutzer turned around and threw two grenades into the aisle. Under the microgravity, the grenades rolled into the darkness of the aisle under Kreutzer's gaze, and then set off a violent explosion, accompanied by screams that symbolized death. Sorry, I don't have time to play with you now. Kreutzer reached back and stopped his body steadily next to the Oracle Gouda's cockpit. After glancing at the smoke-filled aisle, he threw himself into the cockpit. I didn't expect that night to have such a trick up his sleeve. Halbarton, who was supposed to be dead, was actually rescued by him. Then, I don't have much time left. In front of the screen that gradually lit up, the password card of Genesis quietly floated across Kreutzer's sight. Chapter 655. The news of Patrick being shot by his trusted aide, Kreutzer, spread like the wind throughout the entire Yakindue fortress. When Kira piloted the broken Holy Accord Gouda back to Yakindue, no one responded to his request to return. Helplessly, Kira finally piloted the Holy Accord Gouda into the lower half of the Yakindue fortress by himself. However, the moment the gate opened, multiple shuttles suddenly appeared in front of Gouda, almost crashing into him. If not for the previous collision with the Peace Pioneers, which made Kira more cautious, these shuttles might have given Holy Accord Gao the battle record. What happened? Kira had no idea what these shuttles were up to when they boldly rushed out of Fort Yakindue. Moreover, after Holy Accord Gauda stepped aside, not only did these shuttles speed up and leave, but several zines also flew out behind them. As soon as he saw these zines, Kira immediately controlled the Holy Shield Gao to pull back the zine closest to him. "Excuse me, what happened here?" The zine held back by Gauda struggled for a while. As if its pilot saw that it was Holy Accord Gauda who was holding back the zine, he hurriedly shouted in the communication channel, "You, hurry up and follow. Let's go back to plant. Yakindue is finished. Patrick." Speaker Sarah was shot by Kreutzer. "What? Patrick? Patrick Sarah? Was he killed?" Aslan's father was killed. Kira, who was shocked by this news, accidentally let the zine escape. "Lux, no, you'll be fine." Worry for LH-033's safety once again struck Kira's mind, especially after learning that his good friend Aslan's father was shot dead. If an important person with heavy protection could be killed by someone close to him, then the situation of LH-033, who had no power to resist and could even die at any time, was even more worrying for Kira. Then, another figure appeared from behind the gate. Furthermore, this figure appeared along with a series of flames. "Quick, stop him. Is the traitor Kreutzer who shot at Chairman Sarah?" The moment this dark figure appeared, an angry roar sounded in the communication channel. This happened in the blink of an eye. Oh, was the Holy Accord as high as? It looked really miserable. However, if you're still alive after all this, then enjoy your final fate to the fullest. This is Professor Xiang's greatest masterpiece. Yakindue's pitch-black figure was none other than the Oracle Gundam. The moment he brushed past the Holy Accord Gundam, Cruz recognized the Gundam at a glance, as well as Kira Yamato, who was sitting inside. The strongest? Humph. They were just wishful, thinking mortals. Now, Cruz retracted his gaze from Holy Accord Gauda and looked at the fierce battle in front of Genesis. World, wait for me. The appearance of Oracle Gauda, as well as Kim In and Higu chasing after him, passed by Gauda one after another. Other than the angry roars in the communication channel, no one cared about the existence of Holy Accord Gauda, allowing Kira to smoothly enter Yakindue. Lux, wait for me. Attack! Attack! It was still an attack. He did not know what method the enemy in front of him used to be able to stop Freedom Gauda in front of Genesis. Furthermore, with firepower that Gates did not have, they worked together to form a dense net of firepower, preventing Freedom Gauda from rushing to Genesis. That's not Gates. The moment this net of firepower appeared, Ray Minkai immediately felt that something was wrong. No matter how good Gates' performance was, the performance now was no longer within Ray Minkai's understanding of Gates. A modified machine? No. Maybe it was a new machine in Gates' skin. Kai. If this continued, the defensive circle of light energy might become ineffective. After all, this is the first time it's used. We have no idea how good its performance is. White Cat State Zero, who was constantly monitoring the operation of the Radiant Bearer, warned. Okay, understood. It did not matter if it was the real Gates or not. The beam rifles in their hands could not break through the strong defense of the light energy defense circle. The only thing they could do was delay Freedom Gauda's movements. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Freedom Gauda raised his right hand, and the Sirius beam rifle in his hand fired 3 consecutive shots. The 3 beams instantly pierced through one of the gates, causing it to explode on the spot. However, Ray Minkai showed a hint of seriousness. The 3 consecutive shots were not aimed at a single target, but the 3 gates in front of Freedom Gauda. Although this was a probing attack, the remaining 2 gates seemed to be able to predict Freedom Gauda's attack and dodge the Sirius beam rifle's attack axis. Was it an illusion? Beautiful light wings flashed, and Freedom Gauda's figure immediately rose and with extreme speed rushed out of the gate's encirclement and occupied a high vantage point, overlooking all the gates. Ka! The multi-target locking system was activated again. The moment the red cross was fixed, Ray Minkai did not hesitate to pull the trigger. Boom! A slight roar reverberated in Freedom Gao Da's cockpit, and Freedom Gao Da's multicolored cannon roared again. However, the two whale plasma cannons, two swordfish railguns, and the Sirius beam rifle's battle results were far from what they were before. After a series of shots, the gates that were intercepting Freedom Gao Da only paid the price of a few gates being destroyed, and thus survived Freedom Gao Da's multicolored cannon. How is this possible? That ability to predict Freedom Gao Da's attack. Is it NT? A large group of NT? How is this possible? The seriousness in Ray Minkai's eyes gradually deepened. If it was really the NT that Ray Minkai was familiar with, then this number was really too shocking. Even if you were to deduct the few gates that were killed by Freedom Gao Da, there were still at least 40 gates left. That is to say, these gates' pilots could be NT, 40 NT, which misty could produce such a large number of NT. Questions like these continuously appeared in Ray Minkai's mind, but he still couldn't find an answer. Fortunately, Ray Minkai didn't waver because of this. On the contrary, under the effect of his strong psychological endurance, Ray Minkai fought bravely. The song had already sounded in a communication channel that Ray Minkai didn't know about, and it echoed for a long time in the ears of the photographic imprint troops that were piloting gates and fighting against Freedom Gao Da. And on the other side of the song, the eternally sleeping Patrick had already been properly placed to the side. The person that stood on the platform again was that pink figure. The pink figure that once again appeared in the image of Lakis Klein. The song sounded again. That has never been known to anyone. The song that no one knew echoed in the command center that was empty apart from the dead Patrick and the pink figure. In the song, a series of light footsteps could be heard. Chua! The moment the automatic door opened, the song gradually stopped, and Mia turned around to look at the entrance. Are they back? Alicia and Aslan. Appearing at the entrance was Alicia and Aslan. But Aslan's situation wasn't too good. The red mask that covered his face was mostly broken, and the remaining part was still firmly stuck to Aslan's face, showing no signs of being removed. And from the broken mask, it could be seen that the current Aslan was more like a puppet than before, a puppet whose self-consciousness had been destroyed. Seeing this, Mia looked at Alicia, but received the same answer. This mask was given to him by Miss J. We don't know what it is. Lika shook her head and looked at the sleeping man who had been placed to the side. Patrick Sala. He is already dead? Mia nodded her head silently. Kano. His empty gaze wandered around the empty command center, until the moment he saw Patrick Sala's body, the broken mask finally fell off, revealing Aslan's original appearance. It also caused Aslan's suppressed emotions, memories, and soul to violently rebound, forming a terrifying vortex that swallowed Aslan. Father. Father. In a trance, Aslan seemed to have heard Patrick's last words in this world at the moment of his death. Under the huge impact, Aslan's gaze landed on the two women beside him. Alicia Pompey. And me. Mia? Aslan. I'm sorry. I couldn't save Father. Mia looked at Aslan's eyes, shook her head slightly, and avoided his gaze. This isn't a dream? Clearly, Patrick Sala's body, Mia Campbell, who should have been dead long ago, and the huge screen behind her, which was still displaying the launch process of the Genesis. This clearly only existed in Aslan's long past, and it was especially unforgettable, but it was also an irretrievable memory. This isn't a dream. Aslan, you have returned to the past world. Alicia's voice sounded faintly, but she still couldn't attract Aslan's attention. Past? No. AI. Alicia. You. No. Shing. 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 Previously, he was suppressed, but the moment the seal was lifted, the huge soul vortex formed by the huge memory swept Aslan into an unprecedented impact, and he fainted on the spot. Did we do something wrong? Mia quickly walked down the platform and gently supported Aslan, her voice trembling. It wasn't Mia's wish to let Aslan suffer like this. From the endless darkness, Mia, who was awakened by Alicia Pompey, only had one thought, and that was to create a world where Aslan would not be betrayed by anyone and would not be harmed by anyone. No, we didn't do anything wrong. It's just that, in the process, we made some mistakes. Mia, preserve Patrick. No, preserve father's body. We might still have a chance to wake him up. After looking at Aslan's unconscious face, Alicia looked at the Genesis on the screen. Now, we have more important things to do. Mia, let the imprint troops change their target. Although that lion is our enemy, we have the same goal right now. What we want to create for Aslan is not a mother planet burned by the Genesis. Mia gently stroked Aslan's face. Aslan will probably hate us. Then Mia gently placed Aslan beside Patrick Sala. Now please rest in peace. Aslan. In the next moment, the moment the singing sounded again, the gates surrounding Gao suddenly stopped and then turned around and rushed in the opposite direction. They retreated. White Cat Zero raised its head in surprise and looked at the defenseless back. No, they found a more important enemy. Yes, from the beginning, the trembling that came from the bottom of his heart told Ray Minkai that this war had ushered in the final scene. La Lu Kreutzer. In the distance, amidst the flames of the thrusters formed by the gates, the broken Oracle Gundam flew towards the Genesis alone. At this moment, the broken Oracle Gauda was like a lone sheep, surrounded by the gates like a pack of wolves. Light beam, sword blade, at this moment, an earth-shattering hunting net was formed, and the Oracle Gauda was trapped in it, leaving no gap for him to escape. Wong, as if accepting his fate, Oracle Gauda did not move in the face of the unreserved attacks, and accepted them all. Whether it was the light beam or the sword blade, Oracle Gauda did not move at all, and waited for the final moment to arrive. No, that's a trap. In an instant, Lei Mingkai's expression changed. With each movement of his hands, the Freedom Gundam was propelled away from this area by the wings of light. Because in the next second, Oracle Gauda, who was besieged by the gates, turned into a terrifying bomb and released the most terrifying energy in his body, using the terrifying energy explosion to engulf most of the gates who were besieging Oracle Gauda self-destruct. Kreutzer is not inside Oracle Gauda. Behind the light of Oracle Gauda's explosion, the Genesis, which was silently changing the mirror for its third launch, had finally reached the final moment. Genesis mirror replacement completed, ready for the third launch. The red words were like a tide, deeply piercing the eyes of everyone on the battlefield. Chapter 656. Year CE 46. A man who was extremely disappointed and even dissatisfied with his own son's stupidity brought back a child from the universe. A clone that was personally created by the top human geneticist at that time, Yolian Xiang, with a heavy investment. From the beginning, he did not have a name. He only knew that from the moment he was brought back to Earth from the universe and entered a luxurious castle, he was locked inside the castle by someone and lived an isolated life. Every day, every hour, every minute, in front of him was always a pile of books that was taller than his young body, a course that he could never finish, a homework that he could never finish, and a face that he had invested a lot of effort into, filled with anticipation, but with a faint trace of disappointment. Who is he? The child from the universe did not know. The only thing he knew was that he might become this person's successor one day in the future. Or perhaps he would become himself in the future. Clang! The sound of the teacup breaking startled the child who was focused on studying the book in his hand. Too slow. Too slow. The man, who had been sitting on the chair, as usual, suddenly smashed the teacup in his hand. Amidst the dissatisfied words, he stood up and walked quickly to the desk. He looked down at the young face that was filled with confusion. Why? The man's gaze swept across the cover of the book in the child's hand. He knew that this book was undoubtedly a heavenly book for ordinary children. But, now, the child in his eyes was not an ordinary child. Instead, it was a clone that was created from his genes through the top human genetic technology. In other words, the child in front of him was himself. It was clear that he, who was in the same growth stage, could easily master the knowledge contained in this book. However, this clone that originated from him was unable to do so. In fact, he could not even learn half of the knowledge in this book. Why? The clone that cost a lot of money and did not hesitate to use a method to create was actually such a scene. What was the difference between this and his useless son, who was undoubtedly mediocre? Your Excellency, looking at the pair of eyes that were filled with anticipation in the past, but were gradually losing patience now, the child called out timidly. "Shut up," the man shouted coldly, his gaze unusually sharp. "Listen, before dinner, you must complete the task of reading this book." The man said coldly and then left. However, child knew that if he couldn't complete the task before dinner, what awaited him wouldn't be as simple as just starving. The heavy wooden door slowly closed, isolating the child from the world once again. Although the room was magnificent, it was so frightening. Why? The child, who was drowned by the pile of books, asked the same question as the man. But what the child was puzzled about was why he had to endure such harsh and terrifying treatment. The child did not know the answer. The only thing he knew was that dinner was still far away from him, as well as that extremely disappointed face that had become exceptionally distorted and terrifying. Why? Why? It's clearly my genes. It's clearly half my body, but why? Why can't you reach my level? Why? In the midst of the terrifying punishment, the child could only remember these words that he did not understand but subconsciously remembered. Darkness arrived as expected, but the child had no strength to return to the desk. He could only lie on the ground and quietly watch the wooden door being closed again. Why? The pain caused by the punishment of not being able to complete the task tore the child apart, but it also ignited the flame in the child's heart, the flame called hatred. Why? Why did you do this to me? Scenes of him being locked in this room, ever since he came to this castle, appeared in his mind. There was no joy. There was no hope. But it was the fear and hatred that gathered all the scenes together. The moon hung high in the sky, and a small figure quickly passed through the long corridor. In addition to the light footsteps, there was the sound of liquid flowing. Then, a fire that engulfed everything soared into the sky, sending off the small figure who was walking alone toward the unfamiliar outside world. Beep, beep. The moment the prompt of the shuttle sliding into the maintenance channel of Genesis sounded, a pair of faintly withered hands picked up a silver mask, covering the face that was beginning to wrinkle. Under the blonde hair, the silver mask slowly lifted. I didn't expect to recall the memories of the past at this moment. Hey, it's okay. This is just a final reminder. Right. Alda flag. While unfastening his seatbelt, Kreutzer casually glanced at the screen next to him. On the screen, it happened to be the moment when the Oracle Gouda was besieged by the gates, and then exploded the moment the timer returned to zero, dragging most of the gates into the underworld. Oomph. Sure enough, is this all you've got? Those two women. Kreutzer had noticed something was wrong with the existence of Mia and Alicia after the Silver Wind incident. However, after observing that the existence of the two men did not pose any hindrance or threat to his actions, and even Kreutzer's sharp eye saw that the purpose of the two men seemed to be to revolve around Aslan Sarah, Kreutzer knew that the two men were hiding secrets that he did not know. But in the end, they were just women who were blinded by love. Let the final judgment begin. Anxious footsteps echoed in the silent and empty corridor for a long time. Kira, who had finally parked the Holy Accord Gouda, panted slightly as he ran all the way to the ward where LH033 was located according to the route in his memory. In the end, just as he turned a corner, he saw a gray figure lying on the side. The moment Kira's gaze landed on this figure, Kira was stunned. Lux, There was no hesitation. There was no unfamiliar feeling. The moment his gaze fell on that figure, Kira recognized LH-033. How is this possible? How is this possible? That woman promised to make you better. Why did it become like this? The moment he stepped forward and hugged LH-033 in his arms, Kira saw that LH-033's face had lost its usual rosy color and was only left with a deathly pale face. No matter how Kira called out, LH-033 never responded to Kira, nor did he show the smile that made Kira feel at ease like before. No, no, I can't let you die like this. The moment Kira carried LH-033, his expression became even more anxious and panicked. LH-033's body was so light that it was as if there was no weight at all. It was as if the weight of life had already disappeared from LH-033's body before Kira arrived. Worried about LH-033's situation, Kira quickly ran to the medical center he remembered. He was getting faster and faster, so fast that even Kira had never imagined that he could be so fast. However, there was only one thought in his mind, and that was to let LH-033 live. That woman who has the same appearance as Lux, definitely can let Lux live. Suddenly, several white figures appeared in front of Kira's eyes. Judging from their backs, they seemed to be the medical experts who had participated in the treatment of LH-033. Wait, Kira hurriedly called out, trying to stop the medical experts who were evacuating along the escape route. But he was unable to stop them. In his anxiety, Kira actually sped up and caught up with the medical experts before the next corner. Doctor, I beg you, please save her. Kira, who had suddenly stopped them, gave the medical experts a fright. However, after hearing Kira's words and seeing the figure in Kira's arms, the medical experts all took a step back and looked at each other in dismay. Unable to withstand Kira's almost pleading gaze and words, the middle-aged man with short hair, standing in the middle, finally couldn't help but speak up. I'm sorry, we can't let her live, because this is no longer something that we can do. What? No, impossible. Weren't you the ones who treated her before? Kira couldn't believe what he had heard and begged again and again. I'm sorry. A trace of pity flashed across the faces of the medical experts. In the end, it was still the middle-aged man who spoke up. That wasn't any treatment. He was merely trying to keep Mrs. Life. From the day she was sent here, we knew that she wouldn't be able to live for much longer. No, Kira couldn't accept this fact. However, before the words of pleading could come out of his mouth, there was a slight tug on his collar. Enough. Kira, it's enough. Lux, you're awake. Kira was pleasantly surprised to see the girl in his arms wake up. He hurriedly looked at the medical experts with hopeful eyes. Enough. Kira, it's enough. Let's go. Don't make things difficult for them. Although LH-033's voice was still very soft, it gradually became smoother. Kira revealed a trace of hesitation. He knew that if he let the medical experts leave just like that, LH-033 would definitely die. Kira, let's go. Holy Accord Gouda is still there, right? Take me away. LH-033 saw Kira's hesitation and begged. Kira, who couldn't bear to reject LH-033, clenched his teeth and finally nodded. He turned around and left under the astonished gazes of the medical experts. They didn't speak along the way, only the roar that kept echoing in the passage and the flashing red light back and forth. Other than that, there was only Kira and the gray-white girl in his arms left. At the end of the passage, the broken Holy Accord Gouda waited quietly, waiting for Kira and the girl to appear. So miserable. LH-033 raised her head slightly from Kira's arms and looked at the body that was completely different from the Holy Accord Gouda in her memory. The blood-red armor that used to have a strange sense of beauty was so broken at this moment. The pair of sharp horns were broken, leaving only the head armor that was torn apart by cracks. It's okay, Kira responded softly, then looked at the girl in his arms. Lux, shall I go back? Go back. To the two of them, This word probably represented the abandoned colonial satellite that they stayed on before LH-033's illness. No, Kira, Before LH-033 finished speaking, Kira already knew what the girl was thinking. Let's go. It's time to put an end to these things. Kira stepped lightly, and the two of them flew toward the holy Accord Gauda in the state of microgravity toward the cockpit that was already open to the two of them. Kira, it's great to see you again. LH-033 raised her head and looked at Kira, who knew that the next action would be dangerous, but still acted without hesitation. Me too. The holy Accord Gauda, who activated again, rushed out of Yakin Due and saw the scene of the Genesis changing the mirror, as well as the scene of the temporary joint fleet of the three-ship alliance and the 8th Fleet converging with the Free Gau de Kira. We have to stop the Genesis, no? We have to stop Law Lucreutzer. Just now, he killed Speaker Sarah and took away the password card of the Genesis. I'm afraid he's already inside the Genesis and changed the target of the Genesis. LH-033 told Kira about the rumors he had heard. I know. There are some things that we might be able to do. After Kira nodded silently, she piloted the Holy Accord Gauda straight to the Genesis. Fortunately, with the cooperation of the three-ship alliance and the 8th Fleet, the battle around Yakin Due gradually subsided, which gave the Holy Accord Gauda the opportunity to head to the Genesis at full speed without any hindrance. Kira, don't you regret it? You still have so much time. LH-033 asked softly as she watched the countless wreckage of the warpath by the Holy Accord Gauda. No, I just want to do what I can and want to do. Lux, don't worry about me. This is also my choice. Kira smiled softly as she looked at the Genesis that was gradually becoming clearer. Besides, even if I chose to stay in Yakin Due just now, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to activate the Holy Accord Gauda, isn't that right? Hearing Kira's words, LH-033 showed a helpless smile. The tearing pain from the inside made LH-033 gradually unable to hold on. If not for the fact that LH-033 was in Kira's arms at this moment, LH-033 might have already been when they were in the quiet and empty passage. All right. The moment his consciousness gradually blurred, Kira's voice made LH-033's collapsing consciousness slightly recover. Didn't we agree to give you a name? Yes. Kira, have you thought of it? For some reason, when the name was mentioned, LH-033's eyes seemed to begin to condense a light again. Yes. In front of her was the Genesis that had already been reflected in her eyes. Kira smiled gently. Xiaoyi, when I first saw you, I felt that with you by my side, no matter how scary the night was, it would no longer be scary. Xiaoyi? Sounds like a good name. Light, at this moment, quietly lit up from the depths of the Genesis. LH-033. No, the smile on Xiaoye's face was gentle and moving. Kira, let me sing for you. Waiting for you in such a quiet night, picking up the smile that I forgot back then. In the increasingly dazzling light, Xiaoye's singing made Kira firmly push the lever and let the Holy Accord Gauda rush toward the light. Chapter 657. The moment the ear-piercing alarm hit people's ears, the light that was feared by humans once again lit up its terrifying brilliance. Retreat. Quickly retreat. In an instant, the same words rang out in unison. Whether it was the Earth Alliance or the Zaf fleet, they were afraid that if they were a second late, their battleships would inevitably be affected by the Genesis. That's right, because the moment the Genesis completed the third mirror replacement, a warning message sent from the public channel had already informed them of the target of the Genesis this time. Earth, the headquarters of the Earth Alliance. This unsurprising target suddenly made everyone's heart beat wildly. Some people were ecstatic. Some people were extremely nervous. Are we still one step too late? Halbarton clenched his fists tightly, and the expression on his face was even more unresigned. The 8th Fleet, which had rushed all the way from the moon, had paid a heavy price, but they still could not stop the second launch of the Genesis. This was something that Bucky Lulu knew very well. If it were not for the threat from Lars Metayazi, the Archangel would not have experienced such twists and turns, which led to the delay in stopping the launch of the Genesis. Archangel, quickly retreat. It's over if you're hit. Even if there were many unwillingness in her heart, Bucky Lulu still subconsciously sent a warning to the Archangel. The crisis was imminent. Even if Bucky Lulu's warning was not sent out, the three-ship alliance would naturally know. After all, Ray Minkai had already given the three-ship alliance a heads-up before this. Therefore, the three-ship alliance was not on the firing trajectory of the third launch of the Genesis. However, at this moment, the three-ship alliance could only watch as the light of destruction burst out from the interior of the Genesis, rushed to the mirror in one fell swoop, and then, after several refractions, blasted toward the Earth with a destructive light that was enough to destroy tens, hundreds, or even hundreds of billions of lives. Kai, quickly retreat. We're one step too late. The moment the terrible light rose, Free Gouda, who should have retreated with the three-ship alliance, suddenly did not retreat, but instead advanced. He fully unleashed the power of the flying wing-type light-bearer and rushed toward the Genesis. This action not only gave State White Cat zero of fright, but also made Lakis cry out in surprise. Kai, danger! However, in the image before Lakis, Ray Minkai's face did not show any impulsive emotions. Instead, he appeared exceptionally calm. Under the illumination of the light of destruction, this calmness was deeply shocking. Don't tell me that this fellow wants to fight with Genesis. Butterfield's body shook as he looked at Ray Minkai in shock. Lakis, I'll be right back. Lux's scream and Butterfield's shock did not cause Ray Minkai to explain his actions. Instead, he calmly made a promise and cut off communication with the Eternity. Captain Butterfield, Freedom Gao, almost at the same time, Archangel and Grasscatcher, who had discovered Gao Da's strange behavior, also sent him a message. Following that, they received a message from Carrie, who was being protected by the M1 heretic trio of the Dawn Society. I don't know either. Butterfield opened his mouth, but did not dare to voice out his guess. This was because Freedom Gao had already rushed to the front of the Genesis, the airspace where the mirror was located. Since I can't destroy your body, then I'll just destroy the launch mirror. Ray Minkai searched his mind several times. Other than the scenario of self-destructing the nuclear engine from the inside of the Genesis, he could not find any other way to destroy the massive energy supply of the PS armor and destroy the inside of the Genesis. However, the possibility of the former being implemented had long been sealed by Kreutzer. When the three-ship alliance arrived, Dr. Serene, who had a good understanding of the Genesis system, had already joined forces with Director Simmons to try to crack the Genesis system and find a way to shut it down. However, Kreutzer was indeed a terrifying man who had schemed to destroy the world. He was even half a step away from successfully carrying out his plan. The moment the Oracle Gao self-destructed, the possibility of being able to invade the Genesis system from the outside was reduced to zero. At the same time, the possibility of using any method from the outside, including physical destruction, to pry open the door of the Genesis was also reduced to zero. Now, facing this tortoise shell that completely sealed off the connection to the outside world, there were probably only a few ways to stop the launch of the Genesis. Under the mirror, the light of destruction became more and more dazzling. On the mirror, Freedom Gouda, who was fully operating the Radiance Bearer, tried to use the Rainbow Cannon to destroy the mirror. However, facing the Microsoft army, the invincible Rainbow Cannon could not complete the task of destroying the Genesis's launch mirror in a short period of time. Although the launch mirror was a disposable item, it could withstand the terrifying power of the Genesis for a short period of time and complete the launch task. Compared to the terrifying power of the Genesis, Freedom Gao Da's attack was so weak. Kai, leave here quickly. We don't have time. The light of destruction below was right in front of them. The fur on the white cat's body stood up crazily, making the white cat look like a big cotton ball. Suddenly, a black that appeared in the middle of the light of destruction, attracted the attention of the white cat. That's the body. The body that kid is piloting. What the hell is he doing? The white cat almost jumped up and looked at the holy accord Gao, who suddenly appeared below and blocked the light of destruction with a shocked expression. Kira? Raymond Kai's eyes flashed, and he seemed to hear a song. The song was very familiar. It was the song that Ray Minkai remembered when Lakis first appeared, Silent Night. However, from the song, Ray Minkai felt the gentleness of snuggling up to a lover. Is it that photocopied person? The answer to this question was obviously not going to get a response from Kira, because in the song, in the middle of the light of destruction, the broken holy accord Gao rushed in like a brave warrior. Then, a seemingly weak but brighter light was born from the inside of the light of destruction. Chance! Kai! Let's go! The moment the light was born, the white cat, who was afraid that Ray Minkai would not give up and continued to drive Freedom Gao to attack the mirror, immediately fused with Freedom Gao. One must know that this was the first time State White Cat Zero had actively performed a function fusion in front of Lei Minkai. In the next second, the white cat, who had complete control of Freedom Gao, directly controlled Freedom Gao to avoid the genesis. Boom! Holy Accord Gao's generosity was not meaningless. At the very least, it bought some time for Freedom Gao to evacuate, and also caused some accidents to happen in the third launch of the Genesis. The terrifying light of destruction was still terrifying, but in the case of Holy Accord Gao's self-detonation reactor, after a few seconds of continuous firing, it fell into a dead silence. In the void, there was still a trace of light left in the cosmic dust that was burned by the light of destruction. However, the Earth that was locked onto by the Genesis was unscathed as it slowly rotated according to the trajectory of millions of years. In front of them, the glimmer of light left in the vacuum made everyone break out in a cold sweat. Quick! Quick! Confirm the damage caused by the Genesis. Everyone who reacted immediately began to confirm the situation. The three-ship alliance did not suffer any losses. The Eighth Fleet and the Lord Angel that followed them did not suffer any losses. Zaft, Neger, Isaac, and Diego did not suffer any losses either. The ones who suffered losses were the Calamity Gundam, which was unfortunately swept into the third launch of the Genesis during the fierce battle just now. The Calamity Gundam had been annihilated along with the Genesis, and these who had snatched the blue Persian chrysanthemums from the Gundam's side. Olga, Kra. Due to being entangled by Dark Assault Gouda, he was lucky to avoid the ban of the launch trajectory of the Genesis. Gouda floated in front of Calamity Gouda and Gouda, who were destroyed by the gamma ray burst. No, it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. No. Sean was stimulated by the scene in front of him and went crazy. Sean, who was deeply stimulated by the scene of death in front of him, completely fell into madness and completely became a madman who did not distinguish between friend and foe, killing everyone he saw. TSK, are you crazy? Neger Diego, kill him. After fighting with the three rookies for a while, Gautda, who had exhausted all his equipment and ammunition, pulled out his beam sword without fear and greeted him. Isaac was not afraid of the crazy Gouda, because behind him, behind Dual Gouda, there was a partner he trusted. The beam sword waved and slashed straight at Gouda's two shields. Of course, the shield that could distort the beam of light blocked Dual Gouda's beam sword as usual. This attack can't hurt me at all. Die. On Sean's twisted face was the expression of madness. In this regard, Isaac revealed a faint smile. General, you lost. What? Sean was stunned. The screen in front of him suddenly flickered. The moment a snowflake appeared, a blazing heat that was enough to burn flesh and blood swept through the entire cockpit. The crazy Bangao fell silent. Isaac, on the other hand, was gasping for breath. In the game just now, as long as he took a wrong step and foolishly pulled out his beam sword to slash at Gouda he would definitely be banned from Gauda's counterattack and sent into the abyss of eternal damnation. Isaac, are you okay? Two beams of light were pulled out from Gauda's back one after another. It turned out that while Gauda attracted Gauda's attention in the duel, Dark Assault and Storm Gao used their beam swords to cut off Forbidden Gauda's limbs and head monitor, and then pierce through Forbidden Gauda's cockpit in one fell swoop, completing this long, but in fact, it was an instant of tacit cooperation. No, I'm fine. It's just that Genesis. Isaac had seen a launch of Genesis just now. According to the previous two launches of Genesis, the exposure time of Genesis was definitely not as short as a few seconds. I'm afraid there's a problem here. Let's go. Maybe Kai needs our help. The three of them looked at each other through the screen, gathered their last bit of strength, and drove the battered body toward Genesis. On the other hand, on Genesis's side, the third launch of Genesis made people despair, but also made people feel the hope behind the despair. This was because Earth was not directly hit by Genesis. According to Serene and Simmons' calculations and observations, the short few seconds of exposure of Genesis did not break through Earth's atmosphere, which meant that Earth had temporarily survived the threat of Genesis. This doesn't mean that Genesis can't be launched anymore. If the person controlling Genesis doesn't care about anything and doesn't hesitate to self-destruct, Genesis can still have the power to melt Earth's surface in an instant. After all, during the launch just now, the third mirror didn't show any signs of being unable to be used anymore. Celine's expression was solemn as she spoke about the situation that made everyone not dare to breathe a sigh of relief. Looking at the results of Genesis's launch simulated by Celine again, everyone was silent. In other words, when Kira Yamato drove the Holy Accord Gauda into Genesis and self-destructed, it was just to buy us some time? Ray Minkai let out a sound that was unknown whether it was a sigh or a sigh. He didn't expect Kira's fate to be like this. He did such a thing in that song. That song just now. Obviously, Lakis also heard that song. Yes, it's her. Ray Minkai nodded. He knew what Lakis was thinking. Is that so? Lakis sighed. It's a pity that we didn't have time to talk about it. All right, now is not the time to sigh. That terrifying thing is still there. I don't know when it will launch again. Butterfield clapped his hands, signaling everyone to cheer up. Looking at the people on the screen, Ray Minkai lowered his head and looked at the white cat state 0 that appeared again. Everyone, I might have a way to solve Genesis. Zap! The sound of electric sparks kept ringing in his ears. It was as dense as the buzzing of bees and as ear-piercing as the clashing of swords. It pulled Kreutzer back to reality from the boundless chaos. Ha! Cough, cough. Intense pain came from all parts of his body, and there was a sweet taste in his throat. Cough, cough. Kreutzer coughed hard a few times, raised his eyes slightly, and looked at the screen in front of him. There. It was a screen that was filled with dazzling red. Ha! Cough, cough. Ha ha. Cough. Ha 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 ha. In the midst of coughing, Kreutzer's laughter gradually became crazy. It's you again? Dr. Jurian Xiang's masterpiece. Ha 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 ha. I didn't expect you to make such a choice in the end. Ha ha. Interesting. 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 In a room surrounded by cold steel plates, the floating objects floating in the air were floating. The man surrounded by the floating debris looked at the blood-red screen in front of him with a ferocious gaze. Then, he raised his hand and tore off the mask on his face, revealing a rapidly aging and terrifying face that was distorted. Boom! Suddenly, a series of roars penetrated through the layers of protective walls and resounded in Kreutzer's ears. Oomph! Still struggling? This is just a futile effort. Kreutzer's withered hands quickly skimmed across the keyboard, pressing letters one by one. The moment he entered the series of commands into the system, traces of captivating red dripped down from Kreutzer's distorted face onto the keyboard. Looking at it carefully, the traces of captivating red dripping onto the keyboard were like blooming red spider lilies, flirtatious. This is the result. Humans, accept the final punishment. In front of him were the words, overload warning. However, Kreutzer remained unmoved and pressed the final button. Then, he waited for the final moment to arrive. Somehow, Kreutzer seemed to see a huge and terrifying energy gathering inside the Genesis. Then, it advanced along the launch channel, bringing along a radiance that could destroy everything in the world, and once again rushed to the launch mirror. After being refracted many times by the mirror, it once again shot out the light of hell that could wipe out all life in the world toward Earth. Humans, accept the final fate. In that seemingly eternal radiance, Kreutzer saw destruction and also saw the struggling beings under the destruction. This made him feel incomparably happy, incomparably carefree. Yes, 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 this is it. In order to pursue power, in order to be stronger than others, in order to compete, Kreutzer, who was about to witness the destruction of everything in the world, suddenly felt as if his neck was being strangled. He stared straight ahead, staring at the front of Genesis' launch trajectory. Over there, a ring, an airframe, and a lion's shadow that was stepping on the void appeared. Chapter 658. The light of destruction that was even more terrifying than before tore apart the thick smoke from the launch port, once again announcing its existence. It's coming. Kai. White Cat Zero growled, and its figure disappeared. Then, the wings of the wing-shaped radiance bearer behind the Freedom Gundam broke off. Then, under the propulsion of the auxiliary thrusters, they either moved up or adjusted their angle until these wings gathered into a ring behind the Freedom Gundam. System online. The light bearer system has been fully activated. The moment the ring was completely connected to Freedom Gouda, the light bearer system's complete form was revealed. This was one of Raymond Kai's and even Freedom Gouda's trump cards. Although the light bearer system's initial design was to develop deep space, they could not care so much now. Moreover, from the moment the light bearer fell into Raymond Kai's hands, this system had already been deeply involved in the whirlpool of war. The moment the light bearer system was fully activated, a fluorescent light appeared from top to bottom on the ring. Starting from the highest point of the ring, it quickly outlined a strange pattern on the ring according to a certain pattern. Then, a faint white light like a veil, with the ring as the center, cast a dreamy curtain of light behind Freedom Gouda. At first glance, it was extremely dreamy and beautiful. However, the moment this dreamy scene appeared, the attack of Genesis had already rushed in front of Freedom Gouda. Boom! The ray torrent full of destructive aura roared in the void. The cosmic dust that was almost everywhere was ignited by the terrifying high energy of the gamma ray burst, embellishing the advance of the gamma ray burst with extremely dazzling and terrifying brilliance. And at the end of this light, it was not Earth that had long been locked on, nor was it the Plant Colonial Satellite Cluster suspended in space, nor was it the three-ship alliance and the Eighth Fleet that were currently concentrating their strongest forces to launch their strongest and final attack on Genesis. Genesis has been successfully launched. It did not hit Earth. It was blocked. Serene looked at the torrent of light that crossed the void and couldn't help but exclaim. This was because the end of the torrent of light had been forcibly cut off by the free Gouda Kai. Before this happened, Lakis couldn't imagine if Raymond Kai's plan was real or fake. Perhaps, in Lux's heart, she would probably be like Butterfield, Margot, and even Eighth Fleet Admiral Halbarton, who strongly opposed Raymond Kai's seemingly fantastical method. However, due to the fact that the two of them had supported each other since the Silver Wind incident, Lakis subconsciously believed that Raymond Kai's method would work. I will pilot the Freedom Gouda to stop the Genesis for a while. During this period of time, I hope that everyone could do their best to destroy Genesis. Raymond Kai didn't go into too much detail. He just casually mentioned that he would be piloting the Gouda to block the cannon. Moreover, it was to block the terrifying attack of the Genesis. How is that possible? You're crazy. Raymond Kai, although I usually call you a knight, you don't really think that you're a knight who can kill a dragon. No matter how outstanding the Freedom Gouda's performance is, it's the Genesis. A terrifying weapon that can destroy Earth's surface ecology with one shot. Butterfield, who once expressed such strong opposition, gritted his teeth and forced himself not to look at the freedom gao that was blocking the torrent of light. In his heart, he probably already associated the freedom gauda and Ray Minkai with a certain term. Battleships fired continuously. MS shuttled through the void. The huge fleet formed by the three-ship alliance and the Eighth Fleet surrounded the Genesis and poured terrifying firepower that could instantly destroy a colonial satellite. But even so, the Genesis's PS armor, which had a huge energy supply, still became a stumbling block for the fleet. There was no possibility of breaking through the defense of the Genesis. Seeing this scene, Lake's heart tightened. Subconsciously, she looked at the bottom right of the screen at Celine's side. Celine, who seemed to have noticed Lake's gaze, was silent for a moment, then shook her head. That's right. Now, even the designer of the Radiance Bearer was powerless. In the end, Celine had never imagined such a scene from the beginning, using the Radiance Bearer to block the terrifying attack from the Genesis. From the design of the Radiance Bearer, it might be able to block the Genesis for a while, but now, Celine did not finish her sentence, but had already explained one thing. Lakis bit her lips, but did not say a word. She only looked at the end of the torrent of light, at the position of the Freedom Gauda, and at the necklace that was tightly held in her right hand. Rumble, the terrifying sound waves continuously attacked Ray Minkai's hearing. The dazzling light that was almost enough to blind humans filled his eyes. Other than that, Ray Minkai also heard the sound of the machinery inside the Freedom Gao starting to distort and collapse. State 0. Everyone did not know that the one who blocked the Genesis was not the Freedom Gauda, but the white cat that was lying on Ray Minkai's shoulder all day. Roar. Amidst the terrifying sound waves of the Genesis attacking the Freedom Gauda, the white cat State 0. No, it was the roar of the Long Fong Lion State 0. Under the roar, the figure of the Long Fong Lion State 0 appeared from the void and stepped on the back of the Freedom Gauda. The moment it appeared, the ring on the back of the Freedom Gauda suddenly burst out with a light that was more dazzling than the gamma ray burst of the Genesis. Roar. There was another roar. However, this roar could penetrate the vacuum and resounded in the ears of all humans in this void battlefield. What? The roar of the beast resounded through the void. Everyone's attention subconsciously gathered at the end of the torrent of light, but they saw a shocking scene. A shadow had shrouded the Freedom Gauda and isolated the torrent of light from the Genesis in front of the Freedom Gauda. What was even more surprising was that the insufferably arrogant torrent of light that could destroy all the living beings on Earth with a single strike was unable to advance even a little bit in front of this phantom image. That is, the gamma ray burst launched by the Genesis was actually absorbed. How was that possible? Celine immediately straightened her body. She almost lost control of her balance under the microgravity and almost hit the ceiling. Fortunately, Simmons grabbed Celine in time. However, the development director from the Dawn Society was also shocked as he looked at the screen of the observation device in front of him. What exactly is that illusory figure? It can actually absorb the gamma ray burst. Shock was shock, but the situation in front of them meant that they still had time. They could continue to carry out the mission of destroying the Genesis. All ships continued to attack. Halbarton heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Jormungand. Is this also the work of your lord? But when Halbarton took a closer look, he saw that Jormungand, who had always maintained his calm and elegant demeanor, was also shocked. However, this appearance only lasted for a moment before it was hidden by Jormungand. Yes, Admiral Halbarton. Jormungand replied. There was a hint of fanaticism in his tone. Unbelievable. Halbarton opened his mouth, but that was all he could say in the end. Baldfield had the same feeling, but the Desert Tiger did not choose to express his feelings. Instead, he raised his eyes slightly and looked at the pink figure that flew from the seat to the porthole the moment the shadow appeared. He nodded silently. With this nod, the adjutant Martin and Isha who had been paying attention to the desert tiger's movements, immediately began the next step. Archangel, the SS Eternity will now fire at close range. Please pay attention to your surroundings. The SS Eternity's action immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding warships. Although it was risky, it was the only feasible method at present. However, the front of the Genesis could not be approached, because that was hell, an area covered by the terrifying light from hell. Why? Why does it appear in front of me again and again? Inside the Genesis, Kreutzer, whose hands were stained with his own blood, stared at the end of the light beam. It was like an indestructible boulder. The Freegau, Yu Lianxiang's masterpiece is one thing. You, why did you appear again? Kreutzer raised his finger and pointed at the scene where the Freegau blocked the light of creation. Why does that body have such power? Why? As the pilot of the Oracle Gauda, Kreutzer knew the upper limit of the Freegau's power. However, why did the Freegau still have the ability to block the light of creation after possessing the terrifying light wings? Why? Kreutzer kept asking questions, but in the end he stopped thinking amidst a coughing fit that was even more intense than before. In the end, amidst the intense coughing, amidst the blood that kept gushing out from his throat, in Kreutzer's mind, in his heart, there was only one thought left. That was destruction. Destruction. Use everything that I have to make this world a better place. No. Would appear in front of his eyes again and again. Destroy the night who obstructed his actions. Only like this, Lao Lu Kreutzer destroyed the world. Only then could the ultimate goal of destroying humanity be achieved. Cough. Ha. Under the blonde hair was that extremely crazy gaze. That withered and distorted face was almost completely covered by a bright red. Yes, that's it. It's because an existence like you that humans would dream of catching up to an even stronger existence, to control even greater power. Traces of red flowed along Kreutzer's arm, along his fingers, and onto the keyboard, slowly flowing through the gaps between the keyboard, dyeing the entire console red. Kreutzer reached into his pocket, took out the password card that was stained with blood, and then used his last bit of strength to insert it. Beep, beep. A notification sound rang out, pushing the Genesis to the brink of destruction. This was also the final burst of energy from the Genesis, the destruction sequence that had been activated. Now it's the last. Looking at the rapidly completed loading bar, Kreutzer slowly leaned on the console. His body that had already begun to collapse and could only rely on drugs to maintain his life could no longer support Kreutzer's crazy actions. Finally, this is the final result of humanity. Rumble. The moment the destruction program was activated, the Genesis's PS armor that was still unscathed despite the Alliance fleet's firepower suddenly dimmed, then completely lost all its luster, turning back to its inconspicuous gray appearance. The Genesis's energy source has been cut off. Before the astonishment could appear, an even more terrifying aura suddenly descended, pressing down on everyone's heart. Kai, run. Lux, who was floating outside the porthole, silently looked at the Free Gauda's position, actually felt an unprecedented chill, and immediately shouted for Ray Minkai. However, it was too late. The failure of the Genesis's PS armor was not because the reactor of the Genesis had stopped, but because under the control of the destruction program, the Genesis would put all its energy into the gamma ray burst. At the cost of self-destruction, the Genesis would launch the ultimate destructive blow. Rumble. At this moment, the Alliance fleet, who either understood or did not have time to react, could only watch as the light torrent that was twice as bright as before directly pierced through the shadow that enveloped the Free Gauda and directly bombarded the Free Gauda's figure. State 0. Can you still withstand it? The sudden increase in the gamma ray burst made Ray Minkai unable to withstand it, and hurriedly shouted, "It's okay." There was no trace of panic in State Zero's voice, and there was even a trace of expectation. Roar. Just like that. Z-Core, full release. Feeling that the gamma ray burst was getting stronger, State Zero was overjoyed. However, the moment the Z-core was released, State Zero was like a duck that was choked by the neck and lost his voice on the spot. The release of the Z-core was just about to start, but it stopped without warning. Boom! The shadow that isolated the free Gauda from the gamma ray burst finally shattered. A ray of radiation energy that made Ray Minkai tremble and instinctively want to escape brazenly penetrated the free Gauda's cockpit and directly bombarded Ray Minkai's body. Deep blue brilliance. At this moment, Lei Minkai recalled the horrifying scenes that he had seen when he was young about human suffering after being exposed to nuclear radiation. State Zero. Hold on, just a little bit more. Fortunately, the pilot suit that Ray Minkai was wearing was still able to block the remaining radiation after penetrating the cockpit. But if this continues on, it shouldn't be like this. Why did the release of the Z-core stop? It shouldn't be like this. State Zero, who felt Ray Minkai's state, was burning with anxiety. It originally wanted to rely on the release of the Z-core to absorb all the energy of the Genesis in one go, but did not expect such an accident to happen at the crucial moment. Suddenly, a familiar wave of energy came from the Genesis era. It was the energy wave of the fragment. State Zero was shocked and quickly tried to resonate with the energy wave. Then, Lei Minkai heard a song by his ear. Looking up at the sky, it's so sad. There's only a pale and lamenting song. Song? Lakis? Ray Minkai was shocked. The pain that penetrated the cockpit, penetrated the pilot's suit, and caused his body to fall into the abyss of pain quietly subsided at this moment. Roar. Power. That's it. Kai. Hold on. Z-core. Full release. State Zero roared in surprise. The power of the fragment crossed the void and gathered on the shadow of the long-fanged lion like starlight. Under the starlight, the penetrated shadow made a comeback and gradually expelled the destructive light of Genesis from the Freedom Gundam. Then, a more obvious and brighter figure appeared in front of the light of destruction. Roar! This was a roar of rebirth. This was a ray. No, this was the roar of a beast that was reborn under the light of destruction. What? That is. Looking from afar, at the end of the light of destruction, a lion with a clear outline, covered in pure white light, taller than Gauda and bigger than Archangel, slowly raised its head and looked at the Genesis through the light of destruction. Then, the pure white lion raised its front foot and stepped into the void. It turned into a ray of light that was brighter and more dazzling than the light of destruction, pushing the light of destruction back. The light flickered, white and gentle, but it was taken away by the wind to a faraway place. Everyone who witnessed this scene could not understand how it happened. They only knew that everything in front of them was real, and that the song in their ears was so sad. Under the pure white light, the light of destruction, which vowed to destroy all life in the world, could no longer wipe out everything that stood in its way. In the end, it was pushed back to its birthplace by the pure white light. Boom! Amidst the song, the pure white light that pushed back the light of destruction brazenly collided with the launch mirror of the Genesis. The mirror shattered into pieces on the spot and scattered in the void. At this moment, the battlefield was silent. There was only the pure white lion and the song that resonated in people's hearts. Did we win? At this moment, everyone could not help but have this thought in their minds. However, things were still far from over. The pure white lion turned its head slightly and looked at the location of the SS Eternity. It slowly retreated a distance and raised its head to look at the Genesis again. Within the SS Eternity, the girl who used her song to call out to Ray Minkai shook her head and reluctantly extended her right hand towards the pure white lion. No, Kai, don't. The pendant in the girl's hand glowed faintly. It was a call. It was also the return of power. It was also the moment when the throbbing in the depths of her soul awakened. No more running away. I've made up my mind stay by your side. Feel your warmth, Daunt. Look away if everything in front of me, these are all truths that have pierced into my heart. The pure white light once again shone in the void. The throbbing in the girl's heart was incomparably clear. Thus, when the girl extended her right hand towards the pure white lion again, her intentions were clear. Go forward with Ewan till the twisted and blocked on the other side of this door of stars. On this day, a pure white light streaked across Earth's night sky like the Milky Way that traversed the starry sky. It also banished the ominous existence that had almost wiped out the life and death of the world from this world, leaving behind a tear in the void and a song that lingered in the hearts of the survivors after the war. Chapter 659. When the radiance of a star 149, 6 million kilometers away appeared behind the Earth and scattered on the silver-white funnel-shaped colonial satellites in the L5 universe. A supply fleet that had set off from Earth earlier slowly arrived at the universe where the war had just ended. Yakinduwe. The war that happened half a month ago was still vivid in their minds. Whether it was the smell of war, the remnants of the MS in this universe, the wreckage of the battleship, or even the remains that could be vaguely seen in the wreckage, all told the humans who came to this battlefield one fact. Look, this was the result of the humans' actions. Moreover, in front of this result, there should have been a most important existence. Even if it was destroyed, the countless wreckage that should have been left behind should have been a warning sign for people after Yakinduwe's war. However, it was this sign that suddenly disappeared in front of everyone on the eve of the war. What was left was the scar that tore a hole in the pitch-black space that spanned across the void. It was a scar that was about 100 kilometers long and several kilometers wide at the widest part. X1 unknown phenomenon. This was the temporary name used by the top scientific research team in human society after the war. No one knew what this scar that tore the void was all about. The only thing that was known was the process of the scar's creation. It happened at the end of Yakinduwe's war. Under the madness of Zaf's traitor, Law Lu Kreutzer, Genesis used an overload method to squeeze out all the energy it had and wiped out all the creatures on Earth in one fell swoop. In this critical moment of crisis, in the moment when the three-ship alliance and the Eighth Fleet were powerless, a giant lion that exuded a pure white brilliance like flames resisted Genesis' final madness, and in the next moment, erased the existence of Genesis from this world. Then, at the original location of the Genesis, this void scar, known as the X1 unknown phenomenon, was born. A bright yellow space transport ship separated from the transport fleet that came to the L5 universe and slowly flew towards the scar. To be precise, the target of this particularly eye-catching bright yellow transport ship that did not move with the transport fleet was not the scar, but the space station that stopped nearly 1,000 kilometers away from Scar. This was an arrangement from D. S. The predecessor of this space station was D. S. D's Troy Space Station. Originally, the Troy Space Station was built based on the cutting-edge technology of deep space development. After the battle with Yakinduwe, Earth United and Plant jointly sent out an invitation to D to give the greatest consideration to the crack that caused the disappearance of the Genesis. Therefore, Dr. Serene, who participated in the whole process of Yakinduwe's battle and witnessed the birth of the X1 unknown phenomenon Scar, became the overall person in charge of this project. This time, the arrival of this bright yellow transport ship was entrusted by Selene to complete the task of transporting some key equipment from the D headquarters left behind by Dr. Selene on Earth to the Troy Space Station. Channel 11382. Correct. Troy Space Station, new home request. The professor, who had always been lazy, was extremely serious at this moment. No matter how lazy and neurotic she usually was, when faced with the scar that traversed the void, as a researcher, she inadvertently returned to her original rigorous style. This is the Troy Space Station. Permission to enter the port has been granted. Please follow the instructions and enter port number 3. The permission to enter the port from the Troy Space Station was quickly granted. After everything was arranged, the professor transferred the piloting rights of New Home to the intelligent AI named GG. Then, the professor looked at the father and daughter who had been sitting in the guest seat. "Sir, we are about to arrive at the Troy space station. Please prepare to land." Following the professor's prompt, the blond man, who had been resting with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. First, his gaze passed through the porthole and paused for a moment on the scar that could still be clearly seen even on Earth. Then, he looked at the professor and slowly nodded at her. "Thank you, Professor." The professor waved her hand disapprovingly. For her, taking the father and daughter to space was just a piece of cake. Although the itinerary was a bit tricky, she didn't need to do anything. What she needed to do was to send the father and daughter to the Troy space station, then safely send them back to Earth. This is just a small matter. I just don't know what you think about the mysterious phenomenon of X1. You have to know that every corner of Earth is talking about this scar. The professor's words made the blond, middle-aged man's eyes narrow slightly. Then he sighed again. "I don't know. All I know is that when this scar was born, my daughter disappeared along with it." "Father." The moment the blond, middle-aged man showed sadness, the little girl, who had been sitting quietly next to him, sensibly reached out and held the blond, middle-aged man's left hand. "Sister will be fine. Also, isn't brother with sister?" Although the little girl's comfort seemed clumsy, it warmed the blond, middle-aged man's heart. He raised his right hand, patted the little girl's little hand, and nodded. "Yes, no matter what, at least Lux has Kai by her side. Yes, I believe that brother and sister will come back." The little girl felt that her father's mood seemed to have improved, and she couldn't help but reveal a trace of joy. That smile, which was no different from Lux's when she was young, made the blond, middle-aged man slightly absent-minded. Yes, his biological daughter, Lux Klein, had disappeared during the battle with Yakin Dewey. But by his side, there was still the sister that Lux had taken in and acknowledged by him, Clea Klein. The professor saw the interaction between the father and daughter, but he didn't say anything. From a moment the recycling house came into contact with Ray Minkai, the recycling house's position began to subtly change. Even if the recycling house was still in a neutral position, shuttling through the Earth-Moon system, in the eyes of some people, the recycling house was already linked to someone. The scenery outside the porthole had changed from the boundless space to walls made of steel, and the scene of maintenance personnel wearing protective suits shuttling back and forth in the dock. Bang! A slight vibration sounded. It was the sound of a fixed mechanical arm holding New Home in place. "We have arrived at our destination, Your Excellency. Now I will go help Law and the others unload. For the rest of the journey, GG will help the two of you get off the ship." As the professor's voice fell, the artificial intelligence of the first public existence in human history, GG, appeared in front of the father and daughter. "Okay, thank you for your trouble." A few minutes later, the group of people waiting outside saw the father and daughter walk down from New Home. "Your Excellency Sass, sorry for the long wait. I am Andy, the deputy head of security of the Troy space station." The man who said this stepped forward to introduce himself, and the two sides showed a tacit smile. "I am Elidiano Sass. Nice to meet you, Your Excellency Andy." Andy wasn't a person, but the desert tiger Andy Baltfield, who disappeared after the battle with Yakin Dewey. The man he welcomed was Siegel Klein, who went to Scandinavia to take refuge before the battle. These two men from the same faction didn't expect to meet under such a coincidence in the Troy space station with disguised identities. Baltfield nodded slightly at the little girl next to Siegel, then looked at Siegel. "Let's not talk too much. Our side is already prepared. I wonder if you're mentally prepared?" Siegel sighed slightly. "Let's go. Then, please follow me." They were silent along the way. The two people who stayed in the Troy space station with fake identities didn't want to have too much contact with each other. This was because on the Troy space station, in addition to the original D team, there are also people from Earth Union and Plant who had joined as the Joint Observation Team. If there was a slight mistake, their real identities would be recognized. Of course, for Baltfield and Siegel, this was not a very dangerous thing. After all, when the Joint Observation Group was formed, the circle of Midgard hidden behind the scenes began to move. under the control of Jormungand, the members of Plant in the Joint Observation Group were more or less connected to the Klein faction, while the members of Earth Union were much simpler. As long as the members of Earth Union were properly arranged, these people would not have any impact on the operation of the Troy space station, and they would not even meet Baltfield, Siegel, and the others. Therefore, the current Troy space station was undoubtedly the same as a shadow under the spotlight. After passing through a passage under the lead of Baltfield, Siegel and her father came to a strictly protected laboratory. This was the laboratory used by Dr. Serene, the person in charge of the X-1 Unidentified Phenomenon Project. Your Excellency, I've been waiting for a long time. Looking at the father and daughter who walked in, Celine nodded slightly and handed a letter that was properly protected by a glass cover to Sienna. Your Excellency, this is the letter Miss Lakis left for you before she disappeared. Now, we will return it to its rightful owner. A letter left behind by Lakis before she disappeared? Siegel keenly captured the key word. According to the information Siegel received, Lakis went missing during the battle with Yakindue. At this moment, Celine claimed that Lakis had disappeared. In doubt, Siegel looked at Baltfield. If Lakis really disappeared, then Baltfield, who was the captain of SS Eternity at the time, must be the first person to witness it. Baltfield did not explain. Instead, he turned around and locked the door. He raised his arm and pressed a button on his wristwatch. Then, he began to talk about the battle and the moment before the disappearance of the Genesis. When the giant lion emitting pure white flames stood in front of the Genesis, a scene that shocked Baltfield happened to Lakis, who was floating by the porthole. The young girl who sang a song that she had never sung before gently held the faintly shining pendant. In the light of the pendant, the young girl's figure seemed to become somewhat illusory and ethereal. By the time Baltfield and Aisha saw it clearly, the young girl's feet had unknowingly become transparent and had completely disappeared before their eyes. Horrified, Aisha mustered her courage and took off her earpiece. She used all her strength to try to fly to the porthole and grab Lakis. In the end, Aisha's right hand passed through the young girl's body and did not touch any part of her body. The only thing she could clearly feel was the cold porthole. How can this be? Aisha subconsciously shrank back, but Baltfield stabilized her from behind. Your Highness, are you leaving? The desert tiger glanced at the pure white lion that was charging towards the Genesis before turning his gaze to Lakis, whose figure was gradually becoming transparent. Hearing this, Lakis turned around and looked at Baltfield, Aisha, Martin, and everyone on the bridge. She revealed an apologetic smile. Sorry. Everyone, I have to leave now. Otherwise, Kyle will be lost on that side. That side. These were the words Lux had left behind when she had disappeared from the Eternity. Not only was Baltfield and the others puzzled, but Celine, who was in charge of the entire X1, was also puzzled. Your Highness, for the time being, we still don't know what is going on with the side that Miss Lakis mentioned. However, after conducting several targeted probes recently, we finally made some discoveries. Celine was not surprised by Sienna's puzzlement and directly led the topic to the scar. Please speak. Sienna knitted her brows slightly, but she still allowed Celine to make the decision. 72 hours ago, we tried to release 3 batches of probes to approach the scar. From the data obtained by these probes, I'm afraid that the other side of the scar is a world that we have never come into contact with. A world? Is it the second planet with a civilization? Or is it a galaxy? Sienna furrowed her brows and tried her best to understand Celine's words with her knowledge. Unfortunately, Celine did not agree with Sienna's speculation. On the contrary, even the Troy space station, which was at the forefront of the exploration and research of the scar, did not come to a conclusion and was still debating over many possibilities. Right now, we don't know. The only thing we know is that on the other side of the scar, there might be a world that we have never imagined. So, Big Sister Lakis and Big Brother Ray Minkai only went out for a vacation. While the adults were vexed over the hidden meaning behind the scar, the little girl who had been quiet all this while suddenly spoke. Although it was an unintentional remark, it stunned Sienna and Butterfield. Ha ha ha. Little Miss sure is humorous. Perhaps that might be the case. Is that so? It would be great if that was the case. Sienna sighed and subconsciously looked at the huge scar that appeared outside the porthole from time to time as the artificial gravity ring of the Troy space station rotated. When the space that was engulfed by the flames of war regained its silence, the extreme north of Earth was once again covered by a vast expanse of white snow. Since the start of the Aub War, the Aub refugees who were urgently evacuated to various friendly countries also faced different levels of trials. However, Fei Niao's family, who was assigned to the Scandinavian Aub refugee camp, was much luckier. Not only did they have sufficient supplies provided by the SAS family, but they also had temporary jobs arranged by the Scandinavian officials to earn money. Although the salary was much lower than when they worked in Aub, it was already the best situation now that the chaos of war had just subsided and everything was waiting to be revived. Good morning, everyone. Today, we have a special program to broadcast. I believe that when everyone looks up at the sky, you will see a huge scar that traverses the starry sky. Today, we will have some discussions about its origin and existence. Everyone, please pay attention to it. Ding! The instant the sound was heard, the bread that had been baked long ago bounced up and was then picked up by the young man who was staring at the screen. He casually placed it by his mouth and took a bite. Although there was no sauce on it, the young man didn't care at all. That was because his attention was already on the television. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. Serene from D.S. introduce us to the origin of this scar that appeared in the starry sky. Please give her a round of applause. Amidst the applause, the sound of the door opening could be heard. Brother, haven't you had breakfast? We're going to be late. If we're late, the supplies will be taken away by someone else. Following the delicate voice, a young girl with her hair tied into a braid walked briskly to the young man's side. Then, she turned around and looked at the television. After confirming that it was not the content she was paying attention to, she pushed the young man hard. Are you still not leaving? Brother, we're going to be late. Today's supplies are Mother's favorite tomato salad. Quick, let's go. The young girl kept pushing the young man who was paying attention to the content on the television. Helplessly, the young man sighed. Okay, let's go. Right away. Mayo, we still have a lot of time. Quick, let's go. Stop dilly-dallying. Today is Mother's birthday. Mayo's muttering made the young man stop in his tracks and almost let Mayo bump into him. Hey, real flying bird, what are you trying to do? If you don't want to get your salary, just say it. Before Mayo could reprimand him further, the young man had already run off. Only the words that came from the wind were left. Mayo, I'm leaving first. Whoever is late is a pig. Hey, brother, you're cheating. In the end, when Mayo, who ran all the way and was panting, finally arrived at the location of the supply team, she did not see real flying bird. Where did this stupid brother run off to? Mayo looked left and right with a puzzled face. Little did she know that real flying bird, who had left first, was blocked by a car earlier. Real flying bird, nice to meet you. This is the first time we've met, and it may also be the last time. You can call me Jormungard. I'm the same as you. We're both people who are favored by lions. She's taken care of by a lion? In an instant, real flying bird's mind recalled the pure white figure she had seen on TV just now. Chapter 660. The vast and boundless universe seemed exceptionally beautiful, but in fact, there were hidden dangers that could destroy civilization at any time. But in the face of a higher-level existence, these dangers might just be a tool to spy on other dimensions. In a certain remote region of the universe, a black hole that had distorted countless starlight and swallowed dozens of light years was slowly moving along an orbit that was born with its birth. And this black hole that instantly swallowed everything within dozens of light years when it was born was not a place where life was extinct. When looking at this black hole from a distance of light years, life that looked up at the starry sky would always find that there was a faint but abnormally firm white light around the black hole that was moving along with the black hole. At first glance, this faint white light was as beautiful as the halo of the black hole. However, this faint white light was not the last light left behind by the galaxy that was swallowed by the black hole, but it was formed by mysterious battleships surrounded by the black hole. These battleships were completely white, but had mysterious patterns created by mathematical models that humans could not understand. Where did these pure white battleships come from? They could actually be so calm in front of the black hole, dancing with the black hole that was regarded as a forbidden land by many civilizations in the universe, a terrifying existence that brought destruction to civilization. 3,336 hyperspace scan completed. No abnormalities. Changing the scan timeline. Plan to complete the adjustment of the hyperspace radar after 110 hours. In the pale blue network, beautiful women wearing the uniforms of the First Fleet were solemnly exchanging the information they had obtained. In the end, they would submit the results of their exchange to the highest level of the pale blue network, the Queen who followed the pioneers with an ultra-extreme flagship. With the convergence of streams of data, the latest report, but the results were not much different from the previous hyperspace scan reports, appeared in the hands of the cold woman sitting on the throne. Still no discovery? The arrogant scarlet pupils slightly raised, looking at the depths of the Azure network, looking at the sisters who were working hard to find the two lost people in countless spacetimes. She knew that it was almost impossible to find the two people who had been lost in the countless space-time continuums. Otherwise, with the terrifying strength of the Pioneers' First Fleet, they would have already rescued the two from the chaotic space-time turbulence. There was no need to stay at the edge of the black hole for such a long time. King Kong, Her Majesty Euphemia, has returned. The voice of the adjutant of the First Fleet's super flagship, King Kong, reached his ears. At the same time, her figure appeared below King Kong. King Kong turned his gaze and looked to the right of Bai. In the next second, three beautiful figures appeared one after another. They were Euphemia, Vivian, and the young Empress Iserum, whether Iliosia, who was here for the first time. Greetings, Your Majesty, King Kong. Euphemia, Vivian, Ithylum Wiser, Iliosia. It was the first time Ethellam came here. When he learned from Euphemia and Vivian that the woman sitting on the throne was Queen Vajra, who could dominate multiple universes with a fleet, he naturally did not dare to be rude. Is there a new guest? It seems that the knight is really popular. King Kong retracted his gaze and looked at Euphemia. Why did you come back here? According to the time conversion formula here, you have been away from your empire for a full year. Yes, Your Majesty. Before Euphemia could explain, King Kong raised her hand and waved. Don't call me by that name. Just call me by my name. The so-called Your Majesty is just a meaningless action of the common people. According to the pioneers, we are neither gods nor superior beings. In the endless universe, we seem to have the power to dominate everything in your eyes. At this point, King Kong sneered. But in reality, we are just ants that are stronger than you. After that, King Kong seemed to see Euphemia, Vivian, and Iserum looking at each other. Oh, did I scare you? King Kong laughed loudly and irresponsibly put the blame on someone else. This is not what I said. These are the words of the man you call the foreigner. Hearing this, Euphemia and Vivian did not know how to respond to King Kong for a while. These words did make Euphemia, Vivian, and even Iserum realize something. The experiences of these three young empresses were extremely similar. It was just that on the journey of fate, they had embarked on different paths. Of course, this was already a matter for later. Click. A finger snapped. Okay, these words are not important. The most important thing now is to find the two lost people as soon as possible. This is also the reason why Euphemia did not want to stay in the Empire, isn't it? King Kong's question made Euphemia nod. Since Ray Minkai disappeared, Euphemia spent almost all of her time on this side, except for going back to deal with the necessary affairs. For this reason, Euphemia did not hesitate to raise the butcher's knife and slaughter some of the nobles who were restless because of Ray Minkai's disappearance. Thus, in the hearts of the nobles of the Empire, a terrifying image of a young empress holding a blood-colored crown high and stepping on a carpet of blood was born. I am very touched by your persistence. But when King Kong was about to persuade Euphemia to go back and wait, an emergency communication from Area B601 was suddenly uploaded to the Tsong network, reporting to the super flagship. Abnormal fluctuations have been detected in Area B607, suspected to be hyperspace disturbance. According to the analysis, it is very likely to be the hyperspace disturbance we are looking for. The moment this message appeared, the arrogant woman on the throne suddenly stood up and looked down at the three girls below. There is news. Follow me. In the colorful space, a giant lion wrapped in pure white flames was running with its head held high. In this strange space where time did not seem to exist, this giant lion was moving freely like a fish in water. However, as the giant lion ran through this colorful space where even time had lost its meaning, a song rang out from within it. In the midst of this song, the young man sleeping in the lion's body slowly opened his eyes and looked at the colorful yet strange space outside. You are awake, Kai. Before the boy could sort out the current situation, a pair of delicate hands had already wrapped around the boy's neck from behind. A familiar fragrance, a familiar voice, and that familiar pink hair. When these factors sounded in his ears and appeared in front of his eyes, the boy knew who was hugging him from behind. Are you the one who woke me up? Lux. The boy was Ray Minkai, who was once again lost in this colorful space with a long-toothed lion. Yes, it took me a lot of effort to call you back. Otherwise, I'm afraid you would have been lost here. A soft voice sounded in Ray Minkai's ears, and a delicate body slid into his arms from the side. It was Lux. Looking at the charming face under the flying pink hair, Ray Minkai knew that he was not dreaming. In this brightly colored space, there was this Lakis Klein who was vaguely different in front of him was all real. I remember that I was driving the Freedom Gao to Genesis. Before Ray Minkai finished speaking, a burst of disdainful laughter sounded. Hey, Kai, is your brain still not awake? Do you want to let Her Highness give you a morning kiss? This was the voice of State Zero. As the voice sounded, the image of the snack white cat appeared in front of Ray Minkai. State Zero? The appearance of the white cat State Zero shocked Ray Minkai. Suddenly, he remembered the last scene before he lost consciousness. Stepping on empty space, the giant lion burning with pure white flames fearlessly knocked Genesis out of the universe in an earth-shattering way. This is that world space? Recalling that memory, Ray Minkai looked at the surrounding scenery left and right, but he could not find anything that could help him understand the current situation. Yes, but also no. After I absorbed the energy of that big guy, he was swallowed by this space. Now, I'm trying to escape from this space. The white cat State Zero swayed its long tail and looked back at the strange space that seemed to be in front of its eyes, but was always far away. Can you do it? Of course. Maybe it was because it had eaten its fill, or maybe it was because it had not used its full strength for a long time. The white cat State Zero was full of confidence. However, this state of confidence did not last long. Suddenly, the giant lion that was running in this colorful and abnormal space stopped abruptly and almost fell to the ground. Then, the giant lion's body shook violently, as if something was affecting the giant lion's existence, and swept towards the giant lion's body. What's going on? State Zero. Ray Minkai subconsciously protected Lakis and looked up at the white cat State Zero in front of him. The whiskers on the white cat State Zero's face trembled and its body trembled. Its eyes revealed an indescribable pain. It seemed to be enduring something that made it feel extremely painful. State Zero, what happened? State White Cat Zero did not answer Lei Minkai. Instead, it weakly lifted its gaze and glanced at Lei Minkai. Once again, it trembled all over. All of a sudden, an even more violent tremor swept through the giant lion's body, causing the two people sitting in the cockpit to be shaken to the core. Just when Ray Minkai could not bear it and was about to scold the white cat State Zero, the white cat State Zero suddenly showed a comfortable expression. Then, a strange feeling rose in Ray Minkai's heart. State Zero, you. Surprised, Ray Minkai pointed at the white cat State Zero. The white cat State Zero did not care about Ray Minkai's accusation. Instead, it raised its paw and licked it slightly. You what? I just ate too much and had indigestion for a while. This joke is not funny. In an instant, Ray Minkai slapped the white cat State Zero, but unexpectedly, the white cat State Zero in front of him was just a holographic projection. Pa! Cold steel plate, stinging palm, suddenly made Ray Minkai's anger dissipate by 30%. Looking at Ray Minkai's fierce gaze, the white cat State Zero, who said that it did not care, could not help but shrink its head. Then it seemed, indeed it was in the wrong. However, just as white cat Zero's apology was about to come out of his mouth, the colorful abnormal space suddenly changed. Just now, although the colorful space was abnormal, the colorful lights that appeared in front of Ray Minkai's eyes seemed to have some kind of life that Ray Minkai could not understand, constantly flowing in this space without any external factors. However, the moment the white cat State Zero said that it had indigestion and made a joke, these colorful lights that should have been flowing forever suddenly stopped all activities and became lifeless pictures. Kai, I have a bad feeling. Lakis grabbed Ray Minkai's collar and looked around worriedly. Ray Minkai felt it without Lakis's reminder. State Zero, you did a good job. Looking at the lifeless objects around it, the white cat State Zero's eyes twitched a few times, but it could not refute. After all, these abnormalities only appeared after it had indigestion. Kacha. The sound of something breaking came from the top of the giant lion's head. Space shattering? State Zero, run. Ray Minkai saw the crack on the giant lion's head and shouted on the spot. Ka. The moment the pure white giant lion started running again, the crack on its head spread rapidly, tearing the space from top to bottom at a speed visible to the naked eye. No matter where the pure white giant lion ran, it would face the final end. That was when the space shattered. It fell into the boundless dark abyss. Chaos. Chaos with no clear boundaries. A world of black and white that could not be seen clearly. At the same time, in a desolate world that could not feel time, the pure white giant lion that fell here turned around with difficulty and stabilized itself on a space fragment that was slightly larger than itself. It raised its head and looked at the dome that was scattering specks of light into the chaotic dark space. In the next moment, the pure white giant lion moved again. It used the space fragment under its feet as a stepping board and jumped toward the dome above its head. Because in this desolate, chaotic darkness, only by approaching the dome with specks of light could Ray Minkai, Lakis, and the white cat State Zero have a chance to escape. The space fragments scattered like whispers. In the swaying, the final light from the colorful alternate space scattered in this chaotic space. It was exceptionally beautiful, yet so deadly. The pure white giant lion shuttled through this beautiful, yet deadly space fragment drizzle carefully, avoiding all the dangers that it could avoid. Finally, it touched the dome that represented life. However, just as the pure white giant lion was about to rush to the dome, an abnormal wave suddenly came from the void and reverberated in Ray Minkai's heart. Ray Minkai subconsciously followed the call of the wave and looked back. However, he saw a strange and mysterious scene. Amidst the countless scattered and tumbling spatial fragments, a translucent crystal coffin suddenly appeared. Behind the transparent crystal coffin was a beautiful face that could make people feel pity for her at first glance. Who is she? Chapter 661. The black hole model in front of them was deeply disturbed by some kind of force. Every moment, different fragments of information appeared from the depths of the black hole, and then disappeared into the deepest part of the black hole. The scene completely overturned Euphemia, Vivian, and Islam's understanding of black holes. The black hole in front of them that was constantly tumbling fragments of information was no longer the terrifying black hole that they were familiar with that could easily destroy a galaxy. Lord King Kong, what is this? Euphemia hesitated for a moment and finally asked her question. There is something in the black hole. King Kong did not explain much, but it was enough to shock Euphemia. Suddenly, a stream of light descended from the blue network dome and appeared directly beside King Kong. Mother King Kong, did you find the teacher's news? The stream of light dissipated, and the girl that everyone had not seen for a long time appeared in front of them. Mimi. Finally, I have some clues. Mimi, you are still so reckless. Aren't you afraid that if your father finds out, he will make you learn again? King Kong looked at the girl that appeared in front of him, and his cold face softened, and his eyes showed a trace of affection. King Kong's seemingly threatening words did not scare the girl. Instead, it made her walk forward casually, grab King Kong's right hand, and shook it gently. Don't say that. Mother King Kong, you have to know that I am an inspector now. If I have to maintain that reserved and elegant posture, it will be difficult to do things. Mimi said it was serious, but King Kong knew that the girl in front of him was more used to using another set of persuasion to suppress the enemy than to solve problems through negotiation. Thinking of this, King Kong shook his head slightly with a headache, but he did not continue to dwell on this. Okay, now we found that it might be the information disturbance of Lux and Ray Minkai, but we are still not sure where it came from. King Kong casually mentioned their discovery, then pointed to Euphemia, Vivian, and Islam. Mimi, these are your friends. Aren't you going to say hello to them? Right? I accidentally forgot about it. Mimi cried out in alarm and hurriedly turned around. He intimately held Euphemia's hands and repeatedly apologized. Of course, Euphemia wouldn't care about such trivial matters. One had to know that it had been exactly a year since they last met. In the past year, Mimi had been busy as an inspector while Euphemia had been entangled with the affairs of the Empire. In addition, the unexpected disappearance of Ray Minkai had occurred. Therefore, being able to reunite with her best friend during this period of mental and physical exhaustion was a fortunate thing for Euphemia. Don't worry, Mother King Kong will find teacher and Ray Minkai. After some small talk, Mimi comforted Euphemia. Teacher, is it the Universal Peace Ambassador? Although Euphemia was familiar with Lakis Klein's name on the list of missing persons, she was still unfamiliar with the name because she was only familiar with the name on the list. Ah, yes. Lakis Klein is one of my teachers. Mimi responded heartily and then greeted Vivian and Islam. Vivian and Islam were slightly surprised. They didn't think that the girl who suddenly appeared beside the arrogant empress would be so approachable. It seems that you guys are scared by Mother King Kong. It's okay. Mother King Kong may look cold, but she has already approved of you guys. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to enter the Azure network that only the Azure Mind Core can enter. As soon as Mimi noticed that Vivian and Athalam were being reserved, she tried to persuade them to be more relaxed. The two looked at each other and thanked her in unison. To be honest, the three of them had been in the Azure network for a while. But in fact, other than King Kong informing them of some news from time to time, the other mind cores that could see them mostly ignored Euphemia and the other two. Therefore, until now, the three girls with the title of Empress were more like outsiders that didn't fit into the Azure network. Then I'll have to trouble you. Mimi, of course not. Aren't we friends? Unfortunately, the four girls' conversation didn't last long before they were interrupted by an urgent message. Miss, Your Majesties, there's a situation. We detected an abnormal signal in Area B607 again. What makes us feel strange is that this abnormal signal is encrypted information that can be analyzed. What? Quick, take us there. The girls were shocked and followed the guidance to the other end of the Azure network, the area used by the subfleet responsible for monitoring Area B607. You're here. Wait on the side. I'll be right there. As the black gauze dress swayed, the cold woman walked down from the throne and appeared in front of the girls. Seeing this, Mimi waved her hand towards Euphemia, Vivian, and Isolum, and the girls walked to the other side and watched the analysis of the abnormal signal. Not long after, the analysis was completed. Put the results on the screen when you're done. King Kong seemed to have already known the results of the analysis, but she didn't say anything. She just let the mind core in charge of the analysis make the results public. So a holographic projection screen lit up in front of Mimi, Euphemia, and the others. Then, as a series of slightly noisy voices rang out, a clearer but somewhat strange voice rang out. At first glance, it didn't sound like a conversation between people, nor a call signal, but more like music. After Euphemia listened carefully, she exchanged glances with Vivian and Isolum, and found that not only her, but even they were also indifferent. Unexpectedly, Mimi, who was standing on the side, subconsciously snorted along with the strange sound, and her face changed drastically. Mother King Kong, is this really the information we detected? King Kong frowned and looked at Birue, who was commanding the work. The latter gave an affirmative answer. This is indeed the information detected by our first fleet. Before the analysis, we have reviewed it many times. No, impossible. Impossible. Birue's affirmation didn't satisfy Mimi. On the contrary, the cheerful girl couldn't help but take a step back, looking at the information on the holographic projection screen, listening to the voice that was slightly strange to others. But to Mimi, it was very familiar. This is impossible. She is clearly already no longer here. Why would wind appear here? Wind. Mimi's abnormal reaction made King Kong's gaze slightly focused, and at the same time, her mind core was operating at an extremely high speed in a way that ordinary people couldn't understand. In just an instant, King Kong knew the reason for Mimi's abnormal reaction. It seems that the things back then weren't as simple as what we saw. The wind that brings recovery to the world, to guide those who have lost their way. A piece of music, a piece of lyrics, Mimi, who gradually calmed down, slowly sang. Then, Mimi looked at King Kong, and there seemed to be some kind of persistence in her eyes. Mimi, if you want to go. The first fleet will provide space-time anchoring for you. Understood. In the next second, Mimi's figure disappeared, and she was offline from the Azure network. Master King Kong, what the hell happened? Was that a song? Euphemia, who watched the whole process, asked tentatively. Yes, it's a song that guides the lost traveler back home. It's just that this song should have disappeared with the passing of that girl. That girl. Questions came one after another, but Euphemia, Vivian, and Iram didn't continue to ask. Because, from the reaction of Mimi and King Kong, the reason for the reappearance of this song that should have disappeared was probably not the world they could come into contact with at the moment. It was a story that happened when Mimi was still in the rebellious era. The content of the story may be very long, but in the Song of this Wind, Mimi met the most important person in her life. Macross Ferry accelerated and separated from the pure white fleet's formation, and drove fearlessly toward the center of the black hole. In the bridge, a blonde little girl named Nana sat on the sofa, looking at her elder sister who had a dignified face with a trace of nostalgia and other complicated expressions. This was the first time Nana saw her elder sister with such a complicated expression. Macross Ferry has issued a request to set sail to the First Fleet's super flagship, King Kong. Macross Ferry's request to set sail has been approved. King Kong's voice paused, then became gentle. We don't know the danger level of this journey yet. Be careful. Nana, take care of your elder sister. Yes. Understood. The wind became very noisy at this moment. The wind was unusually noisy. The wind that swept across the red desert rolled up the dazzling red sand and swept away into the distance, burying everything that blocked the path ahead. And in this sandstorm, there was a fleet that was moving along the path guided by the radar. Although the speed was not fast, it was the most appropriate strategy to move forward in this red sandstorm. Baba, what's going on? Why did this damn sandstorm have to happen at this time? In the leading off-road vehicle, a slightly fat man with a fierce face cursed in dissatisfaction. But no one dared to answer him. After cursing for a little longer, the man stretched out his palm that was larger than an ordinary person and grabbed the thin man sitting next to him. "Hey, Sambus, don't you think so? This damn Mars, did they know that we just sold a batch of rotten and smelly worms to CGS, so they came to mess with us?" Being grabbed by the man, the thin man named Sambus trembled. For fear of angering the man, he quickly rubbed his hands and said flatteringly, "No, no. Who knows? He might even be surprised by your brilliance and martial prowess. You know, a few days ago, Mars seemed to have encountered an unprecedented meteor shower. I heard that some wreckage of some devices fell in a certain area." Wreckage of devices? When the man heard this, he immediately slapped Sambus to the side. "Oomph. Those junk probably floated over from the Death Waterway. What's there to mess with? If you have time, you might as well get a few more rotten and smelly worms and sell them." That was what the man said, but in fact, the man was still thinking about it. Because he knew that if the wreckage scattered on Mars from space floated over from the Death Channel, it would not have caused such a large-scale spread of news. The man was very clear about his position. Although the name of the Chamber of Commerce was above his head, in fact, it was just a plundering job in the vast space. If the areas scattered with wreckage really had a chance to make a fortune, the man felt that he might not miss such a good opportunity. Therefore, under the command of the man, the convoy in the sandstorm changed direction. With their backs facing the sandstorm that had engulfed a large area, they drove further and further away towards the area that was said to be scattered with a lot of wreckage. The wind whistled, and the sand that was swept up by the wind continuously hit the rock wall, causing a series of slightly ear-piercing noises, causing lame Minkai to frown uncontrollably. This was the third day they were trapped in this desert. After escaping from that strange space, before they could feel happy that they were back on solid ground, they were blocked by the red sand that filled the sky. They couldn't move at all and could only find a nearby cave to temporarily avoid the sandstorm that swept across the sky. State Zero, who was supposed to be a great help for Ray Minkai and Lakis to get through this sandstorm, was now a sleeping lion lying in the deepest part of the cave. This made Ray Minkai a little distressed. Light footsteps came from behind him. "Kai, go back and rest first. I'm afraid this sandstorm will blow for a few more days." A water bottle came from Ray Minkai's side, and then pink hair fell into Ray Minkai's arms. "Lakis, how much supplies do we have left?" Ray Minkai took the water bottle, but did not open the lid to drink a few mouthfuls. Instead, he was concerned about the consumption of supplies. Since the battle with Yakin Wei, Ray Minkai and Lakis had not received any replenishment of supplies. The only thing they could rely on was the standard wartime supplies in Gauda's cockpit. These supplies seemed to be able to last Ray Minkai and Lakis for a while, but there would be a day when they would be used up. Ray Minkai couldn't help but feel a little anxious in this situation. "We can probably last for 3 more days. Don't worry, Kai, we'll be fine. 3 days? Hopefully, this sandstorm will end early." Chapter 662. Perhaps there was always a way out. On the day before their supplies ran out, the crimson sandstorm that engulfed the world finally showed signs of weakening. Hearing the rustling sound from outside that was gradually weakening, Ray Minkai could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Even if the supplies were only enough for the two of them, as long as the sandstorm that trapped them in the cave weakened or even disappeared, there would always be a way out. The sandstorm has finally stopped. Lakis, who walked out of the cave, looked at the gradually clearing sky and patted her chest with lingering fear. During this period of time, Lakis had been under a lot of pressure as she watched the supplies dwindle every day without being able to plan carefully. Although Ray Minkai did not have any complaints, Lakis knew that during this period of time, Ray Minkai would intentionally or unintentionally leave most of the supplies for Lakis to use. As for himself, he would leave the minimum amount of food and drinking water. It's a pity that Free Gao can't use it yet. I don't know when State Zero will wake up. State Zero, who had eaten too much, fell into a deep sleep after escaping from that space. Even free Gauda could not be activated. This left Lei Mingkai with no choice but to use the number 11 bus to search the surrounding area with the cave as the center point. Do I need to stay here? Lakis was silent for a while before asking this question. This was a question that they had to face. The two of them did not have much supplies left, so they naturally had to give most of the supplies to Rei Mingkai, who was going out to explore. Therefore, the remaining supplies would be used by Lakis, who stayed here. No, let's go together. To Lakis' surprise, Rei Mingkai immediately rejected Lakis' question. Go together? But we don't have enough supplies. Lakis was a little surprised, but for some reason, she felt a little touched. If we don't have enough supplies, we can go look for more. However, this place shouldn't be safe now. Rei Mingkai's expression gradually became serious. There was no other reason. He remembered that when he entered this world, he saw a lot of unknown objects enter this world together with the tusked Lion Zero, who escaped from the strange space. Assuming that this world that had just been swept by the Crimson Sandstorm had life, or even a certain degree of civilization, they would definitely be interested in the fragments that fell into this world, or even the long-fanged lion, and would send people to search this area. When that happened, the cave where Rei Mingkai and Lux were hiding would most likely be exposed. With that as the premise, Rei Mingkai had no idea what kind of attitude the nearby races and civilizations would have toward them. Friendly? Or was it malicious? Everything was unknown. For safety's sake, even if he ran out of resources, Rei Mingkai had to ensure that Lakis stayed by his side to deal with any possible situations. Otherwise, it would be more dangerous for Lakis to stay here alone than for her to accompany him out. As for State Zero, Rei Mingkai didn't need to worry about this sleeping lion. Even if the two of them were in danger, nothing would happen to this guy. Half an hour later, the two of them who had packed up their things stepped on the soft sand that dyed the outside of the cave red and gradually walked away. Shashasha, the sound of shovels cutting into the sand rang out one after another, and shovels of red sand were lifted up by the shovels and shoveled onto the wheelbarrow beside them. As the breeze blew, it was not only the red sand that was lifted, but also the beads of sweat that slid down their cheeks and wet the sand under their feet. Ha! The sound of a whip breaking through the air exploded in the wind, and a thin figure was hit to the ground, splashing up a burst of red sand. Work harder, you bunch of trash that can't even compare to sand. If it weren't for the delay in saving you guys, we wouldn't have been caught up by that damn sandstorm. We wouldn't have let those damn Chamber of Commerce get ahead of us. We wouldn't have to come here to dig sand. The fierce-looking middle-aged man waved the whip in his hand fiercely and scolded continuously. Beside him, Sambus also had his hands on his waist and was pointing at two slightly older guys who were much thinner than Sambus. His temper flared up, and he even lifted his leg to kick the guy in front of him, but he didn't expect that he couldn't kick the guy at all. Instead, he was pushed back by the guy and bumped into the middle-aged man holding the whip. I'm sorry. Boss, I just... The fierce-looking middle-aged man turned his gaze and glared at Sambus fiercely. He raised his hand and whipped Sambus. Pa! Sambus fell to the ground. Get up. I asked you to look after this group of trash, not to show off. It was your idea to come here to dig sand. If you don't find anything valuable... The middle-aged man flicked his whip, then pointed at the group of people who were digging the sand. He looked at Sambus and said, when the time comes, you'll have to undergo a Leia's surgery like them. As soon as he heard the term, a Leia's surgery, Sambus trembled all over, and his face was filled with fear. The so-called Leia's surgery was to implant an artificially manufactured high-precision organ that could strengthen the ability to sense space into the human spine. From there, one could sense space, strengthen the flexibility of space, and deal with complex data from machines. However, this type of surgery was extremely risky. Perhaps only 2 or 3 out of 10 people could successfully transplant this type of organ, or perhaps not even one person could do it. Moreover, only human children who were in the growing stage were eligible to undergo such a surgery. For a middle-aged human like Sambus, undergoing this surgery was undoubtedly courting death. Therefore, under the threat of death, the wound that was ruthlessly whipped by the middle-aged man no longer hurt. On the contrary, it constantly stimulated him to urge those people who were called trash by the man to dig out the layer of sand in front of them and dig out the mysterious object buried deep below. Time passed by little, when all that was left of the sandstorm was a smear of crimson on the horizon. The scorching sun in the sky gradually reached the point where it was a headache. The teenagers who were digging without any cover felt that it was unbearable, but they did not dare to stop at all. They did not even dare to ask for a sip of water. On the other hand, the middle-aged man sat steadily under the parasol, watching Sambus stomping his feet and scolding those teenagers. However, the peaceful wait was constantly exhausting his patience. Just as the middle-aged man's patience was about to run out, a tall man quickly ran up from the bottom of the sand dune next to him, attracting the middle-aged man's attention from the sand that he had gained nothing from. There's such a thing? Listening to the subordinate's report, the middle-aged man's eyes suddenly revealed a glimmer of light. Pure white lions. This was a rare thing that had never appeared on Mars at all. In the entire solar system, except for some rare lions on the prairie of Earth, other than some rare lions, the other places could only be seen in textbooks. Have you confirmed it? In surprise, the middle-aged man confirmed with his subordinate again. Yes. When we first found it, we didn't know what the beast was, and there seemed to be traces of human activity around the beast. I'm afraid there will be some twists and turns. The subordinate's actions were calm and rational, which made the middle-aged man very satisfied. Call Sambus and let him bring these dregs. There's no point in digging this sand. If the pure white lion mentioned by his subordinate really existed, then as long as they captured it, they would definitely be able to sell it for a very satisfactory price in the outer circle world. Not long after, in the dust kicked up by the tires, the motorcade carrying the group of exhausted youths set off again. But this time, they were heading towards the cave where the so-called pure white lion was found. Behind the hill, not far away, a man and woman were slowly putting down the binoculars in their hands. Kai, the way they left is our cave. Lakis looked in the direction that the convoy had left in and exclaimed in surprise. Did they already discover our existence? No. Maybe they discovered State Zero. Compared to this discovery, Ray Minkai had an even more shocking discovery. In the dark observation just now, Ray Minkai found that the teenagers who were forced to dig the sand had something that caught his attention. The vertical objects that were implanted from the back of the teenagers' necks and buried deep in their spines, which would be overlooked if one was not paying attention, made Ray Minkai extremely concerned. The sky was filled with red sand. The skinny teenagers who were implanted with unknown objects that Ray Minkai suspected to be familiar with. These were all telling Ray Minkai that this world was most likely a world that Ray Minkai remembered. Kai, what are you thinking about? Those people have gone far away. Lakis, who did not get a response from Ray Minkai for a long time, shook Ray Minkai and tried to get Ray Minkai's attention back. I'm thinking about something. After a pause, Ray Minkai subconsciously rubbed his chin and said, Just now I discovered something from those people that is worth paying attention to. Maybe this can let me confirm which world we have landed in. Lakis showed a hint of surprise. Really? Maybe. Let's talk as we walk. Judging from the direction, those people's target was most likely State Zero's existence. No matter which world it was, the existence of a pure white lion was an eye-catching existence. As long as one was a hunter, one would not let go of such a rare existence. Even if this hunter was not a hunter who hunted ferocious beasts. Kai, what did you discover just now? Lakis laid on Ray Minkai's back and asked softly in his ear. In order to rush back to the cave as soon as possible, Ray Minkai made the decision to let Lakis lie on his back and carry her all the way back. Although the journey seemed a little far, Ray Minkai, who was gradually developing towards the inhuman stage, did not mind at all. Even with Lakis, Ray Minkai was still as fast as flying. I don't know if you discovered it. Some devices were implanted at the back of those young people's necks. That device is called the Alea device. It is an artificial organ that can enhance a human's ability to sense space. However, this kind of surgery is extremely dangerous. Out of 10 people who underwent the surgery, perhaps 2 or 3 of them would succeed, but it is also possible that all of them would fail. Those who succeeded would naturally obtain a powerful ability to enhance their spatial perception, but those who failed would die on the spot. Even if they were lucky enough to survive, they would only live in a vegetative state. How can it be? Then, how can there be such a terrifying surgery? In an instant, a memory quietly appeared in Lakis's mind like a phantom. In this memory, Lakis remembered that she had come into contact with someone who had also been implanted with the same system. That person was none other than Carrie Yura Ashar. No, the Carrie in her memory was not the Carrie who had fought side by side with Yakin Due not long ago. Instead, it was the Carrie Yura Ashar who was much further away. Affected by this, Lakis, whose memory was in a mess, shook her head lightly, causing Ray Minkai to involuntarily stop in his tracks. What's wrong? Lakis, are you not feeling well? No. Lakis slightly retracted her hands that were wrapped around Ray Minkai's neck and replied softly, I just remembered some things. I'm fine. Now, let's hurry back as soon as possible. Ray Minkai, who did not suspect anything, once again took a step forward. However, when the two of them were less than a kilometer away from the cave, a thunderous roar suddenly exploded in the desert. Not good. It's State Zero. The sound of the explosion shocked Ray Minkai, and he hurriedly increased his speed. He was not worried that State Zero would be in danger. On the contrary, he was worried that the group of people who gave him a sense of familiarity would be silenced by the sleeping State Zero. Don't be fooled by the fact that the white cat State Zero was usually carefree. If it was woken up in its sleep, it would definitely throw a tantrum. It was easy to deal with a white cat's tantrum when it was woken up. As long as its fur was smoothed out, this fellow would definitely fall asleep again. But now, State Zero was sleeping in the form of a pure white lion. In addition, the gamma ray burst from the Genesis had already filled it up. Boom! Another deafening explosion rang out. As a column of smoke rose into the sky, a black shadow streaked across the sky and landed heavily not far in front of Ray Minkai and Lakis. In the midst of the flying sand and dust, Ray Minkai's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly stopped in his tracks and quickly retreated a large distance. Kai, what did you discover? Lakis did not understand, but she felt that the surrounding atmosphere was not right, as if something ominous was spreading from the front. Gamma ray burst. Ray Minkai slowly said a term that made Lakis's expression change. Just now, it should be State Zero that released the gamma ray stored in its body. Without a doubt, under the terrifying power of the gamma ray, Ray Minkai's plan to let State Zero leave a few people alive was naturally dashed. Fortunately, in the area filled with gamma ray, a pure white figure was slowly walking towards Ray Minkai and Lakis. Oh, I finally managed to sleep, but I was woken up again. Kai, where did we fall this time? Chapter 663. The Crimson Desert occupied everyone's field of vision. A line of dazzling footsteps extended towards the sky alone in this desert covered in crimson. Judging from the footprints of varying depths and incomparably dazzling, the person who was leaving these footprints in this desert seemed to be under extremely terrifying pressure. Was it the death of this crimson desert? Or was it the fear of the unknown? Perhaps all of these reasons were present. But the most important reason was the nightmare that Sambus had witnessed not long ago. A nightmare that originated from the greedy nature of humans. Asen, that was the leader of Sambus and many other absolute sellers. After receiving news from his trusted aide about the mysterious and beautiful pure white lion, the greedy Asen led Sambus and his absolute sellers through the desert as usual and arrived at a cave. Here, they really did see that mysterious and beautiful pure white lion. No matter who it was, the moment they saw the pure white lion, they were conquered by its beauty on the spot. Therefore, Asen, who had made up his mind to rely on this mysterious and beautiful pure white lion to make a huge profit, decisively instructed his absolute sellers to prepare the tools and try to capture the pure white lion. Even though his trusted aides had already discovered some traces of human activity in the cave, he still couldn't find any traces of human activity. It still could not dispel Asen's greed. Idiot! Maybe those people were scared away by this lion. With beautiful wealth in front of him, Asen could no longer care so much. Looking at the pure white lion that was sleeping so deeply that it did not even notice their arrival, Asen felt as if an inexhaustible gold mountain had appeared in front of him. The absolute sellers were very fast. It did not take long for them to prepare the tools for capturing. Of course, this did not mean that Asen had the habit of hunting beasts, but that these tools were all tools for capturing beasts based on the scene. However, before this, these tools were all used for hunters. However, Asen, who instructed the absolute sellers to move forward, did not expect that this greedy thought would become his last thought in this world. Bang! A muffled sound came from the absolute sellers who were heading towards the pure white lion. Then, before Austin and his men could react to the situation, a couple of heavy thuds sounded in their ears. What happened? As soon as Austin turned around, a numbness came from all over his body, followed by a pain so intense that it could almost tear his body apart. The instant the scream rang out, Sambas instinctively felt that something bad was about to happen, so he retreated a distance away. He saw Oswego, who was usually swaggering around, waving his whip and ordering his trusted hunter from the 4th Bureau around, explode into a cloud of blood mist. No! That terrifying scene, that bloody scene, even though Sang Base had already left the cave far behind him, he still felt a shudder that originated from death. No, impossible. This is impossible. This in this world. How can there be such a scary person? Sambus, of the absolute sellers, of the absolute of life. Sambus, who had just climbed up the absolute of life, of the absolute of life. Of life, of life, of the of life, 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 life, of life, of life, of life, 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 of life, life, life. Of life to life of life, to life of life, of life, of life, of life, of life. Then a figure actually appeared at the top of the absolute of life, just as Sambus was about to fall into despair. Yo, uncle, you seem to be having a hard time. Do you need help? That person looked very young, and his attitude was also very friendly. After looking at the messy footprints behind Sambus in surprise, he nodded his head. Uncle, looks like you are really having a hard time. I didn't expect you to be able to run from the cave to here in such a situation. Wait, cave? Sambus, who originally wanted to ask the young man for help, started to struggle the moment he heard of the cave. That fearful gaze, that frantic movement, and that powerful instinct of his when facing fear actually allowed Sambus to break free from the shackles of the absolute of life. But the violent force not only allowed Sambus to break free from the absolute of life, but also caused his balance to be messed up all of a sudden, causing him to fall into the rolling sand and roll from the top of the absolute of life to the bottom of the absolute of life. Oh, uncle, you are really tormenting. Your body has already become like this. Rustle, as the sound of sand rubbing against each other resounded in Sambus's ears. The unfamiliar young man also slid down from the top of the absolute of life and stood not far in front of Sambus, looking at Sambus's sorry state indifferently. Your son, what? After spitting out a few mouthfuls of sand, before he could say a complete sentence, Sambus realized that he seemed to be leaking air when he spoke. In the next second, Sambus, who took a closer look, discovered that a few teeth had fallen in front of him. And these teeth were not unfamiliar at all, because these teeth were originally his. No. Panicked screams rang out one after another, and Sambus crawled on his hands and feet, avoiding the teeth that had fallen on the sand as far as possible as the sand swirled up. It was as if these few teeth were a nightmare. Looks like you have also been hit. Although you didn't die on the spot like those people. The young man lowered his head and looked at the few teeth, then went forward and squatted in front of the panicked Sambus. Then, Uncle, while there is still some time now, can you tell me where this is? Is there a force worth paying attention to nearby? Where is this? Under fear, Sambus's thinking seemed to be unable to think like a normal person. Only the instinct to answer the young man's question was left. This is Mars, the world outside the circle. Mars? Is it really Mars? Sambus's answer made the young man heave a sigh of relief. Then he asked again, Then, is there a civilian guard company called CGS nearby? CGS. Upon hearing this name, Sambus's eyes suddenly lit up. Yes. As long as I return to CGS, I can be saved. Maruba, Alcade will definitely repay you. With the recovery of his memory about CGS, Sambus seemed to have regained the hope of life, and once again asked the young man for help. However, as if he had caught the last straw, Sambus, who had revealed all the information about CGS, suddenly realized that the young man had unknowingly retreated a large distance away and was looking at him from afar. His eyes were actually full of pity. What the hell is going on? Sambus was just about to reach out and try to get the young man to pull him up, but at that moment he froze. A touch of grayish-white appeared in front of his eyes. It was not an accessory. It was also not a piece of clothing. It was a scene that Sambus was most familiar with. Sambus, who used to be behind Austin, was naturally no stranger to the violent beatings that the absolute cellar troop suffered. Among them, there was no lack of this grayish-white scene. No, the call of death gradually approached, causing Sambus to struggle madly again. But in the next moment, he fell to the ground and fell into the abyss of sin. It ends here. The young man, standing in the distance, slowly turned around, no longer paying attention to the grayish-white scene mixed with black and red liquid that was gradually being buried by the wind and sand. This was the inevitable result of humans. No, it should be said that all creatures, including humans, were exposed to intense radiation. It was already a miracle that this uncle could run such a long distance after being exposed to the gamma rays released by State Zero. However, that was the end of the miracle. For the young man, Ray Minkai, this was just a coincidence. Whether it was the group of people who were killed by State Zero on the spot, or this person who was struggling to survive after being exposed to intense radiation, they could not escape death in the end after being exposed to the relevant information. The red sand gradually rolled up, pushing the desert forward like a day for 100 years, and at the same time, it also completely buried some things that should have been a secret. Sha. Ray Minkai's footsteps gradually faded away in the wind and sand until his figure completely disappeared in the wind and sand. Mars City, Krisa. This was a colonial city built by humans on Mars, and at the same time, it was also under the rule of the forces from Earth. But due to the increasing oppression and exploitation of the forces from Earth, the voices of independence from Mars City, Krisa, became louder and louder. As this voice grew, the activities against the forces from Earth and seeking independence became more intense and intensive. It cast a layer of haze over the economic prosperity of the city. A car slowly drove into the city from the outskirts of the highway. At the same time, the sudden appearance of the car attracted the attention of the guards at the highway exit. Woo, woo, woo. A burst of urgent sirens sounded, and the guards waiting at the exit of the highway blocked the car on the spot. "We are the guards of Krisa. Please show us your identification." It was the usual opening speech, but it ushered in an unexpected scene. As the car window rolled down, the valiant pink ponytail and the delicate face stunned the guards on the spot. "Sorry, we just came from Earth, and we have not applied for the documents here yet. Can you make an exception?" The beautiful pink girl smiled gently, but the guard standing beside the car door was mesmerized. This beautiful lady. Welcome to our Krisa. But you came to bad time. The city is a mess now. I'm afraid it will ruin your good mood." "Mess?" The pink girl was slightly surprised, but she did not insist on entering Krisa, and instead asked other questions. Is that so? Then, how should I get a CGS? My friend has something to entrust to CGS. CGS? Entrust? The guards were naturally very clear about CGS. But the guard standing beside the car door lowered his head slightly and saw the man sitting in the front passenger seat. In an instant, the man's gaze made the guard feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave and was unable to move for a long time. Sir, can you tell me how to get a CGS? After all, my request is a bit urgent. Please. The pink girl's repeated calls made the guard come back to his senses with great difficulty. But at this moment, he was not willing to let the car stay here for a while longer. Over there, after returning to the highway, drive north and go down the first highway exit you see. That is the road to CGS. The guard who finished saying all this in one breath looked at the car that had returned to the highway with lingering fear and could not help but sigh. That guy is too scary. Lux, I didn't expect your acting to be so good. Ray Minkai, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, was very surprised by Lux's performance just now. One must know that the original Lux did not seem to have the title of an actress. It was just a moment of fun. Lux smiled and casually tucked her hair behind her ear, looking a little charming. Fun. Ray Minkai was a little stunned. He had not expected the scene just now would be called Fun by Lux. Could it be that the Lux in front of him was no longer the Lux in his memory? But I've said it before. Your little princess is not as simple as she looks. State Zero's voice lazily sounded in Ray Minkai's mind. You should sleep well. You almost stuffed yourself to death. Ray Minkai's mouth twitched and unceremoniously retorted. You, forget it. I'll just catch up on my sleep. State Zero's voice gradually disappeared from Ray Minkai's mind. Half an hour later, the car that drove off the flat and spacious highway entered a relatively narrow and muddy road. The muddy road that was full of problems caused Lux, the driver, to frown. But at this moment, the sound of an engine came from afar. Lux and Ray Minkai looked at each other, and Lux immediately parked the car on the other side, waiting for the sound of the engine to come closer. In the background of the endless desert and the prosperous city, a three-wheeled vehicle slowly appeared at the end of the muddy road. Judging from the degree of disruption, the three-wheeled vehicle seemed to have plenty of goods. It looked like goods that were going to be sent somewhere. Could it be her? This muddy road, this three-wheeled vehicle, perhaps only a certain person would appear here at this time of the day. Dee. The sound of a horn sounded on the muddy road. The three-wheeled vehicle seemed to have noticed Ray Minkai and Lux standing at the side of the road. The two of them looked at each other, and Ray Minkai immediately raised his right hand and waved. As expected, under Ray Minkai's signal, the three-wheeled vehicle slowly stopped in front of them. Click! The door opened, and a timid little face appeared in front of Ray Minkai and Lux. Excuse me, did your car break down? Chapter 664. The bumpy road, the shaking cab, and the little girl who was focused and trying her best to keep the steering wheel. All of this made Lakis, who was sitting in Ray Minkai's arms, curious. This world was foreign to her. She first saw how the group of youths, whom Ray Minkai called despots, were actually a symbol of the old era, were bullied by others. Then, she came into close contact with the hardworking little girl, Atlas Mixta. Seeing how focused and hardworking the girl was, and how her forehead was covered in sweat, Lakis couldn't help but look up and meet Ray Minkai's eyes. Cough, Atlas Mixta, why don't you let me drive? This road condition is really a bit too much for me. Ray Minkai coughed and almost gave Atlas a fright. Then, under Lakis' reproachful gaze, Ray Minkai and Atlas successfully switched seats, and Ray Minkai drove the three-wheeled vehicle that was struggling on the muddy road. Amidst the sound of the engine restarting, the petite Atlas was pulled into Lakis' arms. Mr. Ray Minkai, sorry to trouble you. Atlas's gaze lingered on Ray Minkai's back for a while before he thanked Ray Minkai shyly. Ray Minkai, who was holding the steering wheel, smiled nonchalantly. No, this is just a small matter. If we want to thank you, Lakis and I should be the ones thanking you. After all, If it weren't for you, Atlas Mixta, I'm afraid Lakis and I would have been on this muddy road for a long time. Yes. So, compared to you saving us in time, letting Guy drive for you for a while is just a small matter. Lux's gentle smile made Atlas blush immediately. At this moment, Atlas couldn't help but think that this sister named Lax Klein in front of him was so beautiful and gentle. Thump, thump. The situation on the road was a headache. Even if Ray Minkai intentionally avoided the potholes, the mud and rocks hidden under the soil were torturous for the three-wheeled vehicle. This was especially true when they were fully loaded with goods. Be careful. You'll be fine if you lean over. Lakis tightened her arms slightly and hugged Atlas in her arms so that she could sit steadily in the chaotic road. Thank you. Atlas's face was still red as he sniffed the fragrance from Lakis' body. Kai, can you drive more steadily? We're not driving a mess. Uh-huh. I'll try my best. This road is driving me crazy. Ray Minkai's head hurt. In fact, a few days ago, after the meteor shower, there was a heavy rain. Perhaps because of that reason, this road isn't easy to drive. Atlas raised her head and carefully explained the situation on this road. I used to take this road to deliver goods to the CGS base. Although this road isn't very good, it's much better than before. Is that so? Meteor shower? Why did meteor showers appear? Ray Minkai and Lakis both knew the answer, so they didn't want to dwell on it. Instead, they chose to skip the topic of meteor showers. Right. After crossing a small hill and seeing the CGS base in the distance, Atlas suddenly clasped her hands together and shouted. How? Atlas Mixta. Lakis looked at Atlas in confusion. You could just call me by my name, Atlas. Atlas raised her head and looked at Lax with her expectant eyes. Lakis smiled and then nodded Atlas's forehead. Then, you can also call me by my name, Lakis. Yes. This way, the relationship between the two seemed to have deepened. It was just that it was time for them to part. When they were still a short distance away from CGS, Ray Minkai stopped the three-wheeled vehicle by the side of the road. Atlas, you'll have to rely on yourself for the rest of the journey. Don't worry. The road ahead seems to have been repaired by CGS. Ray Minkai opened the door and got out first, which made Atlas puzzled. Atlas. There might be some twists and turns in the future. To avoid involving you, the best thing to do is to separate from us for the time being. Lakis also knew what Ray Minkai was going to do next. Moreover, she quite liked Atlas, this little girl who would persevere to the end once she set her goal. Therefore, she did not want to drag Atlas into this matter before everything was settled. Is that so? Atra returned to her driver's seat with a puzzled look on her face, but she still couldn't understand. Lakis and Ray Minkai, aren't you going to CGS too? Why are you getting off now? It's still a bit far ahead. Ray Minkai patted the car door and closed it while saying, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later. But after you arrive at CGS, don't say anything about us. Is that so? Atlas's suspicious gaze wandered back and forth between Ray Minkai and Lakis, but she couldn't find anything suspicious about them. In the end, the puzzled Atlas could only drive the wobbly three-wheeled vehicle to CGS first with a head full of doubts. Lakis retracted her gaze as she watched the three-wheeled vehicle gradually walk down the hill and approach the CGS base in the distance. We won't implicate Atlas, right? Ray Minkai shook his head and smiled. Why would we? We're just travelers who arrived at CGS later than Atlas. Is that so? Yes. On the hill, teenagers in tank tops and long pants were working hard to dig up the exceptionally messy soil. This was a training course that the CGS adults called landmine laying training. The intention was to let these teenagers learn how to survive on the battlefield as soon as possible. However, the youths all knew that these pompous training was just something the CGS adults did to them when they were bored. Because after today's landmine laying training ended, the next day would be landmine dismantling training, and the day after tomorrow would be another landmine laying training, followed by another dismantling training. In the end, before the CGS adults got tired of it, this training would continue. It was torture in name only. Boom, boom. Next to the training area where the mines were planted, there was a specially designated training area for mobile engineers. In the past, this area was given to the pilots of the CGS Third Guard team, who owned and could pilot mobile engineers. In the splattered soil, several mobile engineers with different paint patterns shuttled across the hill. They raised their 30mm autocannons and locked onto the enemy to fire training rounds used for practice. After the roar of gunpowder explosion, it was the sound of training rounds hitting the target and exploding. Damn it, my Azuki August. Their movements are so agile. A sky blue mobile engineer failed in its sneak attack. Instead, its targeted white mobile engineer reversed the attack and locked onto it from behind. Boom, boom. The 30mm autocannons kept roaring. As the training shells exploded one after another, the simulated battle between the mobile engineers continued. This made the teenagers who could only train in laying landmines envious of them. Takaki Uno. He was one of the teenagers who envied his comrades who could pilot mobile engineers in battle. However, Takaki, who was engrossed in the battle, was jolted back to reality by an intense pain. It was a stick. The familiar sensation from his burning face made Takaki realize who was the culprit who had beaten him up in the blink of an eye. Shinoi Jankus. He was a soldier of the CGS first team and also one of the adults who supervised Takaki's third team. In the past, this soldier who relied on the trust of the boss of CGS, Yoruba Alcair, was now pointing at Tadu Milkanen, who was in charge of disciplining the third squad, and cursing loudly. That ferocious look made Tadu Milkanen, who had a big belly but was thin and weak, tremble. He turned around and pointed at the teenagers beside him and scolded. TSK, the third team is really a garbage disposal. Looking at the teenagers who returned to training, Shinoi Jankus turned around and walked towards the CGS base. She didn't care about Takaki, who was lying on the ground and didn't know what was going on. Ryder, who was closer to Takaki, carefully approached him after he saw the evil man walking away with a wooden stick in his hand. Takaki, are you okay? Before Ryder, who was calling his friend, could finish his sentence, he was suddenly attracted by a pink figure that suddenly appeared in front of him. In the breeze that was mixed with the smell of sweat and gunpowder, a long pink ponytail fluttered in the wind. A beautiful face that Ryder had never seen and couldn't describe completely occupied Ryder's vision. And on this face, there was a concerned gaze. "Excuse me, are you not feeling well?" The pink figure gently squatted down beside Takaki and softly called out to him. "I just fainted for a moment. Don't worry." The moment this unfamiliar male voice appeared, Ryder, who was attracted by the pink figure, woke up with a start. He noticed that there was another person standing beside the beautiful figure. A young man who made Ryder feel pressured. Looking at him was like looking at Yoruba from CGS. No, it was like looking at a more powerful human. "Hello, may I ask who is the person in charge here? I would like to meet the person in charge here." The young man who helped the unconscious Takaki to the side expressed his friendliness to Ryder. Person in charge." Ryder was stunned and couldn't react for a moment. At this moment, Tadu Milkanen, who was scolded by Shinoi Jankus, saw Ryder standing there in a daze, not knowing who he was talking to. He immediately ran over in a flustered and exasperated manner. "Hey, you little brat, get to work. Do you want to die?" After the habitual opening speech, the insults that were about to burst out were forcefully swallowed back by Tadu Milkanen on the spot after seeing the appearance of the man and woman standing in front of Ryder. Tadu Milkanen almost choked to death. That's right, they were indeed strangers. But the snobbish Tadu Milkanen could see the temperament of the unfamiliar man and woman. Let's not talk about the young man first. Just from the elegant and calm girl's every move, it was clear that she wasn't a lady that could be nurtured by an ordinary family. "I'm afraid this is a big business." Tadu Milkanen, who had all kinds of thoughts in his mind, quickly stepped forward and pushed Ryder away. "Brat, wake up Takaki. Let him work. I'll entertain these two distinguished guests." After mercilessly scolding Ryder away, Tadu Milkanen showed a flattering smile. "I'm Tadu Milkanen from CGS. May I know what business you two esteemed guests have at our CGS? A commission. A trace of disgust flashed through his eyes. The young man was Ray Minkai and said slowly. Through the scene just now, Lei Minkai already knew who the wretched man with a flattering smile in front of him was. Therefore, don't expect Ray Minkai to be nice to Tadu Milkanen. However, it was precisely because of this that Tadu Milkanen was certain that his guess was correct. The disgust that Ray Minkai inadvertently showed made Tadu Milkanen believe in his own judgment. Didn't the big shots look down on insignificant people like them? Normal. As long as the money in his pocket could increase, Tadu Milkanen didn't have any problems with these matters. A commission? Those two distinguished guests have found the right person. The president is in the base now. I'll lead the way for you two distinguished guests. Please. Tadu Milkanen, who was more and more convinced that his intelligence could make him rich, took the lead and walked in front, leading the way for Ray Minkai and Lux. On the other hand, Takaki, who was slowly waking up, vaguely saw the back of Tadu Milkanen leading the way into the CGS base, as well as his good friend Ride's boisterous voice. Takaki? Takaki? Takaki, you're awake. You really missed out on something good just now. Ryder's loud voice made Takaki, who was still in a daze, confused. Ryder? What's going on? Then who exactly are they? Although he was confused, Takaki's gaze was still attracted by the back view of the pair walking into the CGS base. Oh, you finally noticed. You were knocked out by that bastard Jankus. It was that man who helped you here. Moreover, the woman beside him was so beautiful. Jane, she's just like... Ryder, who was excitedly talking about what he saw just now, was suddenly stuck. Ryder, who didn't read many books, couldn't think of anything to describe the scene just now. In the end, the discouraged Ryder sat beside Takaki dejectedly. Who are they? Takaki, who gradually regained consciousness, looked at the pair and couldn't help but think. Chapter 665. The boss of CGS, Maruba Al-Khair, looked at the couple sitting on the sofa. After a long while, the big-bellied boss finally shifted his gaze from the couple to Tadu Milkanen, who was standing at the side with a hint of wanting to take credit for his work. Tadu, you can leave now. Leave this to me. Maruba did not give Tadu too much advice. Instead, he chased him out of the office like a fly. Then Maruba looked at the burly man with a handlebar mustache standing beside him. This was the captain of CGS's first team. He was also the only man in CGS who was below him, Helda Gano. Helda, who had been following Maruba for a long time, naturally knew what Maruba meant. Thus, under Maruba's signal, the captain of the first squad strode past the man and woman and stood at the door like a door god. Sorry, two distinguished guests. I'm afraid I can't accept your request. Maruba opened his mouth slowly as Helda stood at the door. At the same time, he picked up the cigar on the table and gestured to the couple. Why can't you accept it? Logically speaking, our price is already higher than the market price. The couple did not mind Maruba smoking the cigar. On the contrary, the young man who made Helda nervous asked in confusion. In the smoke of the cigar, Maruba looked at the young man and Helda, who was standing at the door with a nervous expression. It was really rare for his capable subordinate to have such a performance. Why? The smoke of the cigar blurred Maruba's face. There was a hint of struggle in Maruba's eyes. Yes, the price offered by the couple was indeed higher than the market price. Moreover, their request was only to take a ride on CGS's spaceship to Earth. Other than that, they would not interfere with what CGS's spaceship would carry. They did not want to interfere. This way, CGS's spaceship would earn them double the price for a trip to Earth. Such a good commission was very rare in the current market. However, Maruba slowly exhaled a puff of white smoke and put down the cigar in his hand. Sorry, we also have some difficulties on our side. After all, CGS only has one spaceship. What was the reason for Maruba's rejection? The couple, Ray Minkai and Lakis, naturally knew who they were. Before coming here, Ray Minkai had given Lakis a general introduction of the situation in this world based on the situation between the Martian city of Christ and the forces on Earth. Among them, CGS, a group that was about to step onto the world stage, was naturally highlighted by Ray Minkai. Therefore, the moment Maruba rejected the offer, both of them already had an answer in their hearts. Eudelia Lana Bernstein? Ray Minkai smiled. He did not give up because of Maruba's rejection. We naturally understand CGS's difficulties. However, we do have some urgent matters here and need to head to Earth as soon as possible. After a pause, Ray Minkai seemed to have thought of something and said a name that surprised Maruba. All right. Before we came here, we met a very respectable person. We learned from him that CGS can help us reach Earth in a short period of time. His name is Austin. Respectable person? Obviously, Maruba did not understand what Ray Minkai meant by respectable. Especially after Ray Minkai said that name, Maruba finally understood. That was a hunter everywhere in the universe. He was indeed respectable. Cough. What did that person say to you? Maruba's eyes flashed with a hint of doubt. Because, judging from Ray Minkai and Lakis' words and actions, they did not seem to be related to someone like Austin. The only possibility was that there was some conflict between the two sides, which caused Austin, a man who did not want to suffer any losses, to admit defeat. Maruba, who felt that this speculation was more likely the more he thought about it, couldn't help but feel lucky. Fortunately, he did not reject Ray Minkai's request. After we resolved some misunderstandings, Sir Austin recommended CGS to us. At the same time, if CGS can complete our request, His Excellency Austin will write off the debt with CGS. In the next second, Ray Minkai's words caused Maruba to stand up in shock. Really? Maruba's eyes widened. He could hardly believe it. Austin, a hunter who operated on Mars and the Death Channel, was not an easy guy to get along with. Although this guy had plenty of goods in his hands, every time he asked for a price, it made Maruba's heart ache. So far, there was still a large amount of money between CGS and Austin that had yet to be paid. It's true. Ray Minkai took out the token representing Austin from his pocket. Of course, this was not the token that the fat guy gave to Ray Minkai after he came back from the dead. It was the token that Ray Minkai found from the wreckage of the Gamma Ray destroyed vehicles, according to the information that Sambas gave before he died. From the appearance, although it was damaged and distorted, it was enough for Maruba to see the person that this token represented. Maruba walked out from behind the desk and quickly walked to Ray Minkai. He took the damaged and distorted token with both hands. Looking at the damaged and distorted appearance, Maruba already believed 70% to 80% of it. From the degree of damage, the conflict that Maruba speculated did happen. However, this had nothing to do with Maruba at all. This was because even if Austin's team was completely wiped out, it wouldn't affect CGS. On the contrary, this was a huge pie that fell on Maruba's head. After pondering for a while, Maruba finally nodded. 2 distinguished guests. CGS will accept your request. However, we still need to wait here for a few days. Our spaceship's routine maintenance will take at least 3 days to complete. That's not a problem. Your Excellency Maruba, space travel is an extremely dangerous thing. It was inevitable and necessary to be fully prepared to deal with the interstellar voyage. However, I don't know. Before Ray Minkai could finish, Maruba already understood what Ray Minkai wanted to say. Ha ha ha. 2 distinguished guests, please don't worry. Although there is some distance between here and Kreese, we will not neglect our 2 distinguished guests. Helda, we will leave these 2 distinguished guests to you. You must satisfy all the requests of the 2 esteemed guests. Yes, understood. Just like that, Ray Minkai and Lux's plan to infiltrate CGS was declared a success. Originally, other than the plan to infiltrate CGS under the guise of a commission, there was another more radical plan. That was to use force to crush CGS's first team, second team, and even a third team that Olga and Mitsuki were in. This plan was to make Maruba submit to them. However, This plan was not only radical, it was also reckless. If Ray Ming-kai was alone, perhaps this radical plan would be adopted without hesitation. Unfortunately, Ray Ming-kai now had Lux by his side. All in all, it was a blessing to be able to get CGS under the guise of a commission. Under Helda's lead, the two arrived at the other end of CGS. From the cleanliness of the surrounding walls, it was indeed a place that could be used to entertain distinguished guests. Two distinguished guests, this is the place. Before our CGS spaceship arrives at the low orbit port, we would like to invite both of you to take a short rest here. When the time comes, we will inform you in advance. If you have any requests, you can call us through the communication phone in the room. Helda opened the door and stepped aside, revealing the clean room in front of Ray Ming-kai and Lux. Thank you for your trouble. Now, we may need to rest for a while. But, may I know what the meal times are here? Ray Ming-kai's gaze wandered around the room, then looked at Helda again. Yes, we will send someone to inform you two distinguished guests. Please rest assured, if you two distinguished guests would like some personal space, we will send someone to deliver the food. After a pause, Helda's eyes revealed a trace of disdain. After all, we don't have a cubicle for our distinguished guests to eat in peace. Ray Ming-kai could clearly see the disdain in Helda's eyes. Without a doubt, that was a look directed at Team 3. Is that so? Then, I'll leave it to you. The door closed slowly, isolating Helda, Ray Ming-kai, and Lux. Helda stood in front of the door for a while, then looked at the room next to it, then turned and left. Ray Ming-kai, who was listening to the commotion outside, waited for a while before nodding. All right, there should be no one outside. At the same time, State Zero's voice rang in Ray Ming-kai's mind. There's no such thing as a mess here. And, how do you feel, Lux? Looking at Lux, who was sitting by the bed and looking around the room, Ray Ming-kai sighed in relief. Not bad. The people here don't seem too difficult to get along with. Lux nodded and recalled the scene when she was negotiating with Maruba. No, that's just because of our current status. Ray Ming-kai, who was well aware of Maruba's reaction, did not think so. Is that so? Lux pondered for a while, then suddenly remembered something. Oh, right. Kai, that young man just now was the absolute seller? The young man that Lux mentioned should be Takaki and Ryder. No, they're just young soldiers under CGS. Although they are better than the absolute seller in name, their treatment is not much worse. Oh, right. The absolute seller in CGS has a red straight line on the left side of their jacket. Red straight line. When Ray Ming-kai said this, Lux suddenly remembered that when she entered CGS, she did see a few young men wearing dark green underwear with a red straight line on the left side running on the mound. Kai, why don't we go out for a walk? Olga Iska and Biscuit Griffin were urgently called to Maruba's office. However, when they arrived at the office, Maruba did not have the intention to call them over. He only looked at them silently. In this silence, something seemed to be rolling in Maruba's eyes. Olga and Biscuit did not dare to look at Maruba. This was because Maruba's right-hand man, who was also the captain of the first team, Helda, was standing at the side looking at them. If Olga and Biscuit made any strange movements, they would not be able to escape a beating. Sigh. In the silence, Maruba sighed. The Christina Independent Region wants to send their precious daughter to Earth, and the job of the guards is... Maruba's gaze was fixed on Olga. The task of escorting the precious daughter to Earth will be handed over to you and your third team. Olga Iska. When he said this, Olga and Biscuit were instantly dumbfounded. But this was not the end. Also, the next task is related to the debt that CGS owes. Olga Iska, other than escorting the young lady, your third team also needs to escort two important guests to Earth. Duh. In the midst of the sound of the lighter, Maruba lit up his cigar again. After taking a deep puff of the cigar, he continued in the midst of the smoke. As long as we can successfully escort the two important guests to Earth, then not only will a large portion of our debt be written off, but we will also make a lot of money. At that time, we might be able to increase the salary of your third team. The news that followed made Olga and Biscuit completely dumbfounded. The vile Maruba actually said something that might increase the salary of the third team. Even though Maruba did not say it as a promise, it was enough to make Olga and Biscuit feel surprised. That Biscuit hesitated for a moment, but asked anyway. "Excuse me, is the daughter of the representative Gedalia Lana Bernstein?" Maruba nodded. "Yes, that's her. The recently popular independence movement also has something to do with her. I'm afraid that's the reason for going to Earth. But this is the business of those important people. And our CGS's business is to safely escort the young lady to Earth and complete the task." After a pause, Maruba's eyes suddenly became sharp. Compared to the business of those important people, the two important guests that are related to CGS's debt are more worthy of our attention. Whether or not you can make these two distinguished guests nod their heads and promise to write off the debt of CGS depends on your ability. Olga Iska. Olga did not hesitate. She had no other choice. Yes. Chapter 666. In the void of space, a Bisco-class cruiser belonging to Lars Horn, the armed organization that ended the Ursa War 300 years ago, slowly left the last relay station set up by Lars Horn in this void before arriving at Mars. Mars? As a colony, an empty shell that had been sucked dry of flesh and blood, is it really worth us, Lars Horn's inspector, to make a personal trip? A blue-haired young man with the rank of major in Lars Horn's officer uniform leaned against the back of his friend's chair in boredom. He looked at the relay station that was gradually forgotten by the Bisco-class cruiser he boarded. The blond young man sitting in the commander's seat revealed a smile after confirming the news sent by his subordinate. He tilted his head slightly to look at his close friend. "Is the mission of patrolling the border boring?" "Galio." The blue-haired man smiled gently, then stood up and looked at his close friend. "How can that be? As a military officer belonging to the Ministry of Supervision, I will do my job dutifully." "Agent McGillis, Mr. Major." After a pause, the blue-haired man, named Galio, looked away and looked at the man who stood in the corner from beginning to end, observing the situation on the bridge. A man whose face was covered by a dark mask. Compared to this, I am more concerned about his existence. A suspicious person of unknown origin who was able to board this ship. McGillis had already expected his best friend's reaction. The smile on his face did not diminish. Instead, he stood up and looked at the dark void in the distance, as if the crimson planet was about to appear in front of him. Now the economy of the Earth's circle can only be maintained by stepping on that empty shell. Even if they were to sacrifice themselves for the prosperity of the Earth's circle, it would be too much. Moreover, as the gatekeeper of the prosperity of our world, the Mars branch is also the same. Mr. K, don't you think the current situation is necessary for reform? Mr. K, the masked man who was targeted by Galio, but was questioned by McGillis, raised his head slightly and followed McGillis' gaze to the void. I don't know the situation on Mars. However, the prosperity of Earth is thanks to the semi-metal trade on Mars. In the trade, the forces of the Earth's circle constantly rely on their own influence to put pressure on Mars, which led to the current situation. The dull voice slowly came from behind the dark mask, which made Galio frown. Galio knew a little about the origin of the man who always showed up in a dark mask. However, what he was dissatisfied with was that McGillis seemed to rely heavily on the man who did not show his true face. Every time he encountered a problem, McGillis would always take the initiative to discuss it with him. It was the same from the first day he boarded the battleship. Now it was the same. Do you mean that the reason for the increasing independence of Mars is that the Earth is to blame? Galio's eyebrows twitched as he questioned the masked man in a reprimanding tone. "Hey," Mr. K sneered. "Is that not the case? Let's put aside the pressure on Mars by the Earth's circle. Lars Horn, who controls the safe route created by the relay station between the Earth's circle and Mars, how much profit did they reap from the increasingly prosperous semi-metal trade?" Major Gario Badwin, the eldest son of the Badwin family, one of the 7 stars families of Gallahorn, might know something about this. Mr. K's words were like a fatal blow, deeply hitting Galio's vital point. As the eldest son of the Badwind family, one of the seven-star families that controlled Lars Horn, even if Galio was not interested in the internal struggles of the seven-star families in the past, he would always hear about the rumors of the seven-star families from various sources. And the semi-metal trade from Mars was the most important of these rumors. Therefore, in the face of Mr. K's counterattack, Galio could not find any words to refute it. This made Galio, who always put himself as McGillis' best friend and a collaborator in a major project, feel extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, his good friend McGillis had saved Galio's face in time. Mr. K's words are not without reason. Galio, we have no way of knowing how much of a mess the Martian branch, which monitors the trade routes between Earth and Fire, has left behind in places beyond the reach of our Gallahorn headquarters. Therefore, perhaps the only thing we have to do is to change. With that said, McGillis turned back to look at his best friend and asked softly, "Also, the voices of Mars independence are getting more and more intense. Maybe we don't have time to care about other things. Galio, maybe we'll be busy." Galio looked at McGillis' troubled expression and then sighed. "Is that so? Then, I'll do my part to help you. Also, it's best for a certain fellow to just sit here and watch the show obediently. This might be a provocation." However, the person who was targeted by Galio nodded, as if it was a matter of course. "That's natural. After all, compared to Major Galio Badwin, who is full of military ethics, it's better for me, an ordinary person who only knows how to talk all day long, to stay in a safe place." Galio, who didn't expect to be countered, almost exploded on the spot. Fortunately, McGillis' timely pacification stopped the quarrel between the two. Night. Ray Minkai and Lakis walked out of the cafeteria and strolled on the empty field that had long become silent. Looking at the tracks left by the mobile engineers, Ray Minkai seemed to have become silent. This surprised Lakis a little, but she understood Ray Minkai's feelings at the moment. Seeing once was better than hearing 100 times. Even if he had seen the scene through the binoculars before, he could not see the situation up close. Alea consciousness system. This was a taboo technology that Ray Minkai briefly talked about. After Lakis saw the teenagers who had the Alea consciousness system installed, she suddenly felt that Carrie Yura Ashar, who also had the Alea consciousness system installed in her for a long time, was very lucky. The teenagers who survived the Alea consciousness system implantation did not receive better treatment. Because of it, instead, they were oppressed and bullied even more. Even if these teenagers could use the Alea consciousness system to familiarize themselves with driving the mobile engineers that adults would need some time to master, the situation was still the same. Kai, is this the treatment of the Alea consciousness system? The cold night wind blew Lakis' voice to Ray Minkai's ears. Ray Minkai did not speak. He just slowly nodded. Yes, this was the Alea consciousness system that he saw with his own eyes. Not to mention the famous duo of Miyazaki and Olga. The Akihiro he met during the day was completely different from the Akihiro Ray Minkai met in the creator's world. At that time, although Akihiro was taciturn, a trace of happiness could be seen between his eyebrows. Especially when Ravda appeared, this taciturn, tower-like man's gaze never left her. He seemed especially attentive and gentle. But now, the Akihiro in front of Ray Minkai was taciturn, unfamiliar, and closed off. Even when Ray Minkai tried to greet Akihiro, he was met with an indifferent and cold gaze, like a machine that only listened to orders. Lakis, HM, Ray Minkai's soft call made Lakis come closer to him. Kai, I will support you. Although Ray Minkai did not say anything, Lakis seemed to have understood Ray Minkai's thoughts. Ray Minkai shook his head, but did not say anything. In contrast to the two people in the cold wind, except for a few people, the members of Team 3 had already fallen asleep. In a room full of pipes, the two people who trained themselves strictly as usual were competing to see who could do the most horizontal bars. But as a tall and sturdy member, Akihiro seemed to consume more energy than the short Miyazaki. Because of this, Akihiro did the horizontal bars while complaining about the difference in weight between him and Miyazaki. Yes, yes, but the person during the day was very strong. Miyazaki casually responded to Akihiro, but in his mind, he recalled the young man who defeated all the members of Team 1 in a few moves during the day. During the day, Akihiro was stunned. He almost let go of his hand and fell off the horizontal bar. After finally catching his breath, Akihiro said, "That man? I heard he asked us to send them to Earth." Miyazaki, do you think it's a joke? Miyazaki was silent for a moment. Then he pulled the horizontal bar faster. Akihiro was so scared that he quickly followed up, afraid that he would lose to Miyazaki. In the hangar, as the captain of Team 3, Olga was talking about the mobile engineers with CGS's maintenance member, Nadi Shwezaguchi Kasaba. Okay, that's all the equipment you need to prepare. A middle-aged man with dark skin and a tall and sturdy body, completely unlike the name Shwezaguchi, tapped on the tablet in his hand. Thank you for your hard work. Olga, who saw that the thing that worried him the most was finally settled, couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. However, the serviceman's father said, "That's right. Have you seen that pair of honored guests?" Olga was stunned, then nodded. "Yes, I saw them during the day. I didn't expect them to suddenly appear in the cafeteria." Olga couldn't help but smile bitterly when she remembered the situation during the day. That man and woman, how should she say it? The man had not only brought pressure to the members of the first squad, and even the third squad, but the woman beside him had also made Sino and the other hot-blooded fellows dizzy on the spot, and had almost caused trouble. Fortunately, someone had set a trap for the third team. Team 1. As the name suggests, they were the pillars of CGS. Under Maruba's heavy reliance, it was natural that some people would despise him for having such a despicable personality. So, under the situation where they didn't know the identity of the guests, this group of people who were used to being arrogant inevitably had some flirtatious and careless behavior. But in the end, Olga, Sino, Akihiro, and even Miyazaki, who was engrossed in eating, were all shocked by this scene. In just a blink of an eye, a few members of Team 1 who surrounded them fell at the young man's feet. They couldn't move at all, and only their painful howls could be heard. "Hey, what did you do to North, Toro, and the others?" As soon as they saw their own people being beaten, the other members of Team 1 immediately surrounded them and complained. "What did I do? It's just a lesson." Looking at more than 10 people surrounding him, the young man didn't back down. Instead, he stepped forward and protected the woman behind him. "You're quite good at talking. Do it." Not sure if it was because they were angry or because they were controlled by some kind of impulse, but they didn't think about why this man and woman who didn't look like ordinary people would appear. Now, everyone in Team 1 rushed up and prepared for a group fight. "Wait, you guys are..." Sino subconsciously called out, but was stopped by Olga. "Sino, wait, look." Olga's gaze became very serious, because the members of Team 1 who ganged up on the young man were once again in the same situation. In just a blink of an eye, they all fell to the ground, screaming in pain, and couldn't stand up again. What exactly is going on? No one knew. The only thing they knew was that Maruba and the leader of Team 1, Helda, who rushed over after hearing the news, had very ugly expressions. At the same time, Maruba squeezed out an even uglier smile with difficulty and apologized to the man and woman repeatedly saying that he wouldn't do it again. He even fired the few members of Team 1 who caused trouble on the spot. Olga, who had witnessed the whole process, could still clearly recall the scene, even in the middle of the night. After all, they are important guests. "I heard that as long as we complete their request, CGS's debt will be reduced by more than half." The serviceman uncle put down the tablet in his hand and looked at Olga. "And yes, that's what old man Maruba told me personally. So, compared to the lady who will be coming tomorrow, old man Maruba cares more about the important guests." Old man Maruba raised his eyebrows, then raised his hands and stretched. "Who cares? If CGS's debt can be reduced, then I can work here for a longer time. No matter what, it's beneficial for me." Olga was slightly stunned, then smiled and said, "You're right." Although that was what she said, for Team 3, It wasn't clear whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. After all, if CGS's debt was reduced, then Team 3, as a disposable product, would probably face more difficult requests. Chapter 667. Godilia Lana Bernstein was here. Judging from a noisy gait in the early morning, the girl with a great reputation in the Martian city of Chryse had finally arrived at the base on the outskirts of Chryse under the morning sun. However, her arrival seemed to be accompanied by other noises. Ray Minkai looked away from the window that allowed him to see the gate of the CGS base and looked at the images of the activities in Chryse. The people here are so lively. Leica sat on the bed and looked at Ray Minkai as she spoke softly. The people holding various slogans and even using markers to write various sentences on their bodies were not unfamiliar to Lakis. In Lakis's memory, there was no lack of these things. Instead, in an even more distant memory, the Klein faction used similar methods to pressure the Sala faction. This is just one of the few ways the people here can express their voice and will. Ray Minkai gently pulled the curtains to block the gradually brightening and somewhat dazzling sunlight. He then turned around, poured a glass of water, and handed it to Lakis. "Why don't you go out and eat something? You haven't eaten since you woke up." Lakis took the glass, took a sip, and shook her head. "No, I just don't want to get out of bed." "Are you not used to the environment here?" Ray Minkai took the glass again and asked with concern. Although this was a planet that could allow humans to survive, it was actually very different from the plant colony satellite group, an Earth that Lakis was familiar with. Although Lakis did not react to this at first, as the duration of her activities on Mars increased, Lakis would probably have some stress reactions that she could not adapt to. However, these were all Ray Minkai's guesses. Hopefully, it wouldn't come to that. As if sensing Ray Minkai's worry, Lakis smiled softly as if she was comforting Ray Minkai. "Kai, I'm fine. I just don't want to get out of bed." Then, as if to reassure Ray Minkai, Lakis slowly stood up and took the initiative to say that she wanted to eat breakfast. After seeing that Lakis seemed to be fine, Ray Minkai nodded and was temporarily relieved. But just as the two left the room and walked through the corridor toward the cafeteria, they unexpectedly met a man and a woman who were also walking through the corridor. The man was short and wore a coat that was far larger than his body. The woman had an elegant temperament and seemed to be well-educated. She was a blonde girl in a bright red dress. "Oh, Sanryu, I didn't expect to see you here. Don't you need to train today?" Lei Minkai had met Sanryu once during the incident at the cafeteria, but they didn't talk much. Perhaps it was because Lei Minkai could easily take down the first squad, but Sanryu seemed to be a little afraid of Lei Minkai. Maybe this was due to instinct. Sanryu looked at Ray Minkai with narrowed eyes, then nodded. This big." Just as he was about to introduce the person behind him to Ray Minkai and Lakis, he didn't expect that he couldn't remember the person's name at all. And this scene didn't surprise Ray Minkai at all. Ray Minkai knew what kind of personality Sanryu August had, and so he took the initiative to introduce himself. "Hello, I'm Ray Minkai. This is Lakis Klein. Just like you, we're both travelers heading to Earth." The girl in the red dress subconsciously wanted to return the greeting, but she suddenly raised her head and looked at Ray Minkai. "Earth? The two of you are also heading to Earth? Also, do you know me?" Lakis smiled lightly. "I'm afraid there aren't many humans on this planet who don't know the name Godiria Lana Bernstein. Don't you think so, Kai?" Ray Minkai nodded. "Yes. Ever since the July conference, the people of Chryse have gradually gathered under the banner of Godiria Lana Bernstein. Right now, I'm afraid that Godiria's name has already spread to the other side of Earth." Ray Minkai and Lakis sang the same tune and successfully took the initiative in their hands. As for the other party, one didn't care and even wanted to end this meaningless tour guide job as soon as possible, while the other didn't seem to have experienced such a situation. "No, that's just what I think, what I should do. It's not worthy of such praise." After all, she was the girl who was seen as the hope of the people of Chryse, so Godiria quickly calmed down after being praised by Ray Minkai and Lakis. Immediately after, Without waiting for Ray Minkai and Lakis to respond, Gaderia directly suggested that she wanted to travel with them. Right? Although the two of you might already know my name, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Gaderia Lana Bernstein. Are the two of you also going to Earth? Why don't we walk together? Ray Minkai and Lakis looked at each other and agreed readily. With the addition of Ray Minkai and Lakis, the three suns and moons suddenly felt relaxed. Originally, because of Maruba and Olga's orders, the three suns and moons had no choice but to face Gaderia's problem. This made the three suns and moons, who usually hated troublesome matters, feel a little troubled. Now, with the addition of Ray Minkai and Lakis, the three suns and moons were happy to be at ease. They even maintained their silence and led the way in front. Ray Minkai didn't point this out. May I ask why Mr. Ray Minkai and Miss Lakis are heading to Earth? Gaderia looked at the silent three suns and moons, then looked at Lakis and Ray Minkai, especially Lakis. This woman who exuded an elegant and amiable aura attracted Gaderia's attention as soon as she appeared. In terms of words and actions, even the eldest daughter of the Bernstein family was inferior to her. What kind of person is this? Gaderia, who was thinking about this, slowly moved her gaze and looked at Ray Minkai. At that moment, Gaderia seemed to feel a sense of pressure, a pressure that she had never felt before. Even when she was young, Gaderia had entered and exited the slums that were filled with chaos and violence, and had come into close contact with violent people who had killed people. She had never felt such a terrifying pressure from them. Fortunately, this pressure only lasted for a moment. The moment Gaderia's breathing stopped for a moment, the pressure receded like the tide, as if it had never appeared. This is a warning? The moment Gaderia reacted, she couldn't help but think. Miss Gaderia, are you feeling unwell? Lakis asked with concern. No, I just thought of something. Gaderia shook her head repeatedly, then said, Oh, right. You could just call me by my name. Correspondingly, I also hope to call you by your names. Lakis and Ray Minkai looked at each other and nodded in unison. Then, we'll offend you. Gaderia. No, I should be the one to be offended. Lakis. Gaderia smiled, then looked at Ray Minkai. She seemed to be troubled by the way Ray Minkai addressed her. Speaking of which, it made sense. The structure of Ray Minkai's name was a little different from the grammar that Gaderia was familiar with. Perhaps this was the difference in grammar between different worlds. Even though Ray Minkai and Lakis wouldn't be unable to communicate with the locals due to language differences due to certain reasons, their names would still pose a problem that was neither too big nor too small. Kai, you can call me that. Kai? Single word? Gaderia pondered for a moment, then nodded. I understand. Then, Lakis, Kai, please take care of me in the future. Gaderia's tour of CGS ended smoothly. As soon as they were released from the tour mission, the 3 days and the moon disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ray Minkai knew that this guy must have gone to train as soon as possible. However, according to their training method, they could no longer improve much. The situation of driving the mobile engineer was still okay. However, when he was driving an MS that was equipped with the Alea system, a simple exercise of his physique was not enough to deal with the increasingly intense battle between the MS. Looks like I need to find an opportunity. Ray Minkai raised his head and looked at the starry sky that once again turned from day to night. He turned back to look at Lakis. Lakis, are you tired? No, it just feels wrong. The air here is a little strange to me. Lakis frowned and looked around the wasteland outside the base. No, Lakis, go rest first. Maybe we'll be busy tomorrow. Ray Minkai knew what Lakis was concerned about. However, Ray Minkai hoped that Lakis could have a better rest before that incident happened. Kai, do you feel something? Although Ray Minkai tried to hide it, Lakis' sharp intuition still noticed something. No, go rest first. Lakis. But Ray Minkai did not tell Lakis. He even turned around and carried Lakis, strode back to the room, and stuffed Lakis under the blanket. Okay, if there's anything, we'll talk about it tomorrow. I'll be here with you. Lakis, don't worry. Ray Minkai's toughness made Lakis frown, but she did not say anything, because she knew that if Ray Minkai did not want to, even if she made a fuss, it would not be of much use. Now that Ray Minkai insisted that she rest early, it was probably to deal with tomorrow. No, maybe it was because of the upheaval that was coming. Lakis, who was thinking about all kinds of possibilities, finally fell asleep with Ray Minkai's company. Kai, you're really a knight who cares about the princess. If you tell the truth, Lakis will understand you. State Zero's voice sounded in Ray Minkai's mind. No, understanding is one thing, but Lakis will accompany me to wait for the arrival of dawn. This is not a good thing for her. Ray Minkai gently covered Lakis with a blanket. What about you? It's not an easy task to deal with enemies without sufficient sleep. I'm already used to it. Ray Minkai looked at Lakis, who was gradually falling asleep. Just as he was about to get up and walk to the window, he paused. Hey, looks like the princess doesn't believe your lies. State Zero's laughter echoed in Ray Minkai's mind, making Ray Minkai feel helpless. This was because Lakis had unknowingly pinched his clothes. Looks like this is the only way. Ray Minkai looked at the night sky outside the window and sighed helplessly. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on the situation outside. It's just that the free gal does still need some time. Okay, I'll leave it to you. The night gradually deepened. As the clock turned, physical fatigue also appeared, making the young soldiers at the sentry post somewhat at a loss. The training during the day, the sentry post in the middle of the night, all of these were torturing their immature minds. In a random moment, perhaps in a moment of a yawn, a merciless bullet sent them into the darkness of eternal sleep. Puff, puff, in the dull sound of a body falling to the ground. A signal flare that lit up the surroundings as bright as day rose into the air. All the young soldiers at the sentry post were awakened. Immediately after, before they could react, the screeching sound of cannonballs tearing through the night sky followed one after another, tearing the silence of the night sky to shreds, and also waking up the sleeping humans in the CGS base. Boom, 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 an ear-piercing roar. The tremors that constantly impacted the base caused Lakis to open her eyes immediately. Kai! The moment she opened her eyes, Lakis subconsciously called out, I'm here. Lakis, don't worry. It's okay. In the midst of the roar and tremors, Lakis' right hand felt a familiar warmth. It was the warmth of Ray Minkai's palm. Okay. Lakis gradually calmed down and turned to look out the window, looking at the night sky that was brightly lit. Is the enemy attacking? Yes. Gedelia's arrival will naturally lead to Lars Horn's attack. After all, Gedelia's philosophy is not accepted by Lars Horn. Then what's next is a battle. Lakis' eyes revealed a hint of determination. Yes. Ray Minkai nodded. I'll let Olga and the others take care of you. Leave the rest to me. It's just a group of insignificant fleas. Yes. Although Lars Horn had a resounding reputation in this world, if it was just a Mars branch, Ray Minkai would not be afraid. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.